Welcome back to Manhwa Unlocked. Hit that subscribe button and let's unlock another world.
Ariadne Eldir, heir of Duke Eldir. She is a secondary character who died even before the beginning of the novel. The fate of the main heroine changed at the moment she was born. Now the heroine was standing by the window, pondering all of this. Suddenly, a maid entered the room and informed the lady that it was time for them to go. The girl thought that in this place, she absolutely had to survive. After that, together with their maid, they set off for where they needed to go. The heroine walked and thought that this was her only chance. It turned out that she had to escape. Just as they approached an open door, they could hear a conversation between two men coming from inside. One of them declared that they had loved each other so much, and she had died not because of him, but because of monsters. The old man stated that he didn't believe him. What a talented mage, to have died because of monsters. The interlocutor also noted that she had been so fragile and had never fought them. At the same time, the young man asked if this man knew how shocked he had been back then. After that, the old man cried out that he should have saved her. The interlocutor, with tears in his eyes, remarked that she had said that if she were to leave this world, it meant she was unworthy of being a holy maiden. He continued to cry and screamed that he would never forgive himself for it. The heroine listened to all of this attentively, but suddenly the maid closed the door to that very room. Then the girl asked the older woman if they were talking about her mother. She also asked if she understood it correctly. The maid approached her, took her by the hand, and stated that it wasn't important. It seemed the Duke was still busy, and they should wait a little. The heroine immediately thought of the old man, whose name was Solon Garcia. He is a talented mage who received the title of Grand Mage of the Empire, and he is her grandfather. Because of the girl's father, her mother became pregnant very early, and her grandfather hated the man for it. Because of this, he even disowned her mother. Having heard of her death, he came here after a full 8 years. The girl understood that he was exactly as he was in the novel. So, he had been doubting her mother's death all this time. At that very moment, the main heroine remembered her mother and how she had once rushed to her. The woman saw her daughter, who was quite badly injured. She looked at the girl's hands, and they were completely covered in wounds. The heroine asked if she really didn't need to study anymore, but her father had still said that she had to do it. At that very moment, the woman began to cry bitterly and told Arya that she shouldn't be taught such things. She also promised that she would no longer allow her to go through all of that. At the same time, she hugged her tightly and said she was very sorry. Sometime later, her mother disappeared somewhere, and the girl was with her father. She asked him where her mother had gone. The man stated that she had gone on a journey. He also said that if the girl performed her tasks well, he would tell her where she was. Joyfully, the girl asked if he was telling the truth, and the man said that, of course, it was so. After that, the father asked if the girl would do what he asked of her. The heroine joyfully hugged him and said that, of course, she would do it. At the same time, she now thought that she would definitely endure all of it. At that moment, the heroine heard a girl saying that since he had come, he wanted to see his granddaughter. The maid told the girl that they could now enter. She also noted that she had to behave very carefully with the guest. At that moment, the girl thought that it was either now or never. And so the heroine entered and stopped, smiling sweetly at the old man and her father. The Duke asked his interlocutor if he knew her name. It turned out her name was Ariadne Eldir. After that, the man signaled for his daughter to greet her grandfather. Immediately, the heroine bowed to the old man. Then she looked at him and thought that she looked nothing like her mother. She had thoughts in her head about what the Grand Mage might be thinking. The old man said to let the girl come closer, as he wanted to get a look at her. The heroine immediately remembered that this moment was in the novel. Arya got scared and rushed into the Duke's embrace. Small children can sense whether people like them or not. It turned out that according to the novel, Ariadne's grandfather hated her. And so she thought that perhaps she had acted exactly as it was there. But still, she knew the plot of that novel perfectly well. The main heroine stood motionless, and her father immediately told her to stop it. What if she broke away and ran towards the old man? At that very moment, she thought that even though he was a grand mage and hated her, he was still much better than her father. The heroine ran up to him and grabbed the hem of his clothes. Her grandfather had not expected this at all and was shocked by what was happening. Suddenly, he looked into his granddaughter's eyes, and she, pitifully, begged him to take her with him. The girl thought that she wanted to be anywhere but here, so she mentally begged him to pay attention to her. She couldn't tell him everything in front of her father, but she really needed this. The heroine very much hoped that the old man would take her with him, despite his doubts. But suddenly the girl's father approached and spoke to her. At the same time, the man stated that he had told her not to behave like that with guests. Then he tried to detach his daughter from the old man. She thought, was this her failure now? But suddenly the grandfather intervened in the conversation and stopped the man. At the same time, he asked the girl if she really wanted to go with him. The main heroine was very happy and exclaimed that that was exactly what she wanted. The old man said that was very good, but he hadn't expected that she would want to go with him. Then he patted her head and said they needed to leave urgently. Suddenly, the Duke intervened in the conversation and stated that this would not happen, as it was too dangerous. The grandfather asked why he was forbidding her to go. Had he forgotten who he was? His interlocutor remarked that Arya looked very much like Gloria and had a very weak constitution. Solon told him that he had raised Gloria, so he didn't need to worry about that. He added that since his granddaughter wanted to go with him, he was taking her. It turned out that he had never visited her, and that was probably why she wanted to be with him. He couldn't do all this in the past, so he would do it now. After that, he told the man that he would take her away now, but the Duke immediately cried out that this couldn't be done. It seemed that if he didn't want to back down, he would have to use force right now. Then, literally in despair, he shouted to Ariadne to come to him. The old man remarked, was he really talking about using force, and asked if he thought he was weak. Then, literally in despair, he shouted to Ariadne to come to him. The old man remarked, was he really talking about using force, and asked if he thought he was weak. Then the grandfather stated that he considered this kidnapping, and the Duke could go to the palace to complain about him. He would be interested to hear what the emperor himself had to say about it. The Duke continued to shout at the Grand Mage to stop and not do all this. But the old man and the girl didn't stop for a second and continued on their way. Sometime later, they settled into a carriage and departed from the estate where they had been. The girl looked out the window at that very building and thought, was she really saved? She also thought, was it really that simple, for she could have attracted attention. Suddenly, the old man addressed the girl and told her to tell him something. At that moment, the heroine thought that this person probably didn't even want to see her. The grandfather asked her to tell him what she was so afraid of. He was curious why she had latched onto an old man she was seeing for the first time. The heroine immediately realized that this definitely wasn't in the novel. On top of everything, she didn't understand why he was being so gentle with her. The old man told her that everything was all right now and she could tell him everything. The girl immediately thought what was happening as tears began to well up in her eyes. At the same time, she understood that she had to explain to him what had happened, and she was ready for a deal. But she just couldn't stop the tears and didn't understand why she was sitting and crying in front of the old man now. The man noticed this and immediately hugged the girl. At the same time, he said that if she wanted to, she should let herself cry. The main heroine obeyed him and began to cry very loudly. The old man, in turn, hugged her and said she was a poor child. This continued for some time, and they sat like that together. The heir of Duke Eldir, Ariadne Eldir, despite having the power of the saint, was never able to unlock it. It turned out she met her end at the age of 16, and so the main heroine learned of her fate. The girl remembers what happened when she was only 7 years old. Her father was standing there, inventing something, and he had some kind of flask in his hands. When the man turned around, he saw that his daughter was sitting near a chair and was completely unconscious. Immediately after that, he approached the girl and asked if she had gotten scared. As a result of these actions, the heroine immediately came to. The man approached her and whispered in her ear not to be afraid. After all, he wouldn't do anything dangerous to her. At the same time, he had a flask with some strange substance in his hands. Then he stated that he wouldn't do anything bad because he loved her after all. But a moment later, he still gave her that very liquid, and the girl screamed in pain. She said that it hurt very much, and she didn't want to do any of it. After some time, the main heroine fell asleep. After a while, she was literally in a fog and thought about where she was. Her thoughts were visited by the idea that this was a dream. She asked herself what her name was and then remembered that she was Ariadne Eldir. It turned out that this year she was 7 years old. But when she remembered her whole life, some other memories surfaced in her head. She wondered what it was because the memories were not from this world at all. All because there was science instead of magic, and also these strange machines. The girl realized that before this, she had lived in a completely different place, and all these were memories of her 28 years of life. It turned out that all these memories were of her past life. The moment she realized all this, a bright flash of light illuminated her consciousness. Because of this bright light, the girl was blinded and didn't understand what was happening. A moment later, the light ceased, and she opened her eyes, seeing some kind of corridor before her. She became very curious about where she was now. After that, she walked around this place to find out what it was. Then she realized that it was a library. Approaching one of the shelves, she saw a fairy tale about fairies. At the same time, the girl understood that she had read this book in her past life. Then she began to examine collections of poems, as well as detective novels, stories about diplomacy. She had read all these books in her past life. That's why the girl realized, was this the library of her own memories? After a while, she walked around the building some more to see what else was there. Suddenly, her attention was drawn to a stack of books on one of the shelves. The girl wondered what these books were, as there were about 10 of them, and it turned out to be a novel. The heroine was curious about what it was, and she immediately took the first book to read its contents. The very moment she started reading it, it was written about Ariadne Eldir. The main heroine realized that this book contained her name, so this was the very novel she had read in her past life. Axel Valentine is the main character, who is capable of returning to the past. The novel tells of how he tried to save the world from the invasion of demonic beings. But despite the main hero's efforts, the world fell. So, that's how meaninglessly the entire novel ends. According to this novel, Ariadne Eldir did not live long. In one of the chapters, she saw that Duke France Eldir had 2 children. The girl understood that this was the very world and the very name that she had, and all that remained was for her to admit that she was Ariadne Eldir from this very world. The heroine read that Duke France Eldir had 2 children. At the age of 16, his biological daughter, Ariadne Eldir, died. Therefore, he had to recognize his adopted daughter, Helen Eldir, as his heir. Everyone considered her a genius. However, the power she used did not belong to her. She used the technique of the light left to extract the soul. Thanks to artifacts created by the Duke, Helen was able to become the mistress of spirits. The girl realized that she used the technique of the Holy Maiden to extract the soul and used artifacts created by the Duke. Despite the fact that Ariadne is hardly mentioned in the novel, the girl still couldn't understand something. But suddenly she looked at her hands and thought, why did she die at such a young age? At that very moment, she realized that the reason was obvious. Then she remembered what her own father had done to her. Now she was only 7 years old, and he told her everything was fine and he wouldn't harm her, but at the same moment, he gave her poison. Remembering her previous life, the heroine realized something. This was not normal. Now she looked at her injured hands and cried, because in her opinion, it was disgusting for a father to do such a thing to his own daughter. Then she wondered if he really meant it when he said he loved her. After that, she remembered what her father had said about her mother. He stated that she was traveling, which was why she wasn't here. And now the girl thought, did he really kill her? And if he really killed her, then it meant he would one day kill his daughter too. After some reflection, the girl realized that France Eldir was dangerous. Now, she had firmly decided that she would learn the truth and change the ending of this damned novel. While the main heroine was thinking about all this, she was sitting in her grandfather's arms. He was hugging her tightly, so the girl even dozed off for a while. At one point on the road, the man shouted to his subordinates to hurry up. At that very time, the carriage they were in was rushing at high speed along the road, and outside, thick snow was falling. After some time, they reached the estate where they were to live. The man in the estate ordered his subordinate to bring him the expense report for the previous year. The young man immediately said he would do whatever he ordered. After that, the man looked out the window and saw a carriage approaching the estate. Then he stated that Lord Max had returned to her. His interlocutor remarked that he had returned earlier than expected. Then he stated that Gloria's death was being investigated, but he insisted on a separate, personal investigation. Suddenly, the subordinate stated that it seemed he hadn't arrived alone. The man asked what he meant by not alone. Suddenly, the old man shouted throughout the estate for his son to come out immediately. So, it turned out his granddaughter was about to die. The man asked, "What granddaughter? Did he even have a granddaughter?" The old man continued to shout that Ariadne Eldir was the sole heir of Duke Eldir. The man immediately thought, who was this Ariadne Eldir? He was also curious, had his father really brought her with him? But he still didn't believe it, because he didn't need anyone except his own son. Then he thought, if he was talking about the sole heir, did that mean he had done something terrible? He imagined that his father had gone and stolen the girl from Duke Eldir. But at the same time, he understood that this simply couldn't be. After that, he decided he had no choice but to sort it out himself. Immediately, he threw on his cloak and shouted that his father had gone completely mad. After some time, the main heroine herself woke up. She looked at the ceiling and thought, where was she? Was this her room? Then the girl realized she had never seen such high ceilings before. After that, she got up and thought, had she lost consciousness? Now she was curious about how long she had slept. Suddenly, the door to the room she was in swung open, and a maid appeared. That very girl was very happy and shouted throughout the estate that the lady had finally woken up. At this time, the main heroine tried to get out of bed to walk around. But when she stood on her feet, she immediately collapsed, but the maid caught her. At the same time, she asked the girl if she was all right. She also stated that it was still difficult for her to stand on her own. After that, she laid the heroine back in bed and covered her with a blanket. After all these actions, she asked if the girl was cold and if perhaps they should light a fire. They absolutely couldn't allow her to catch a cold here. The heroine didn't understand what was happening and immediately addressed the maid informally as you. And the interlocutor asked what she needed now. And again, the heroine was shocked by her friendliness. After that, the girl looked at her face and thought that she didn't know or remember the last time someone had smiled at her so friendly. She also recalled that the people who worked for the Duke wouldn't even look her in the eye. The heroine asked what her name was. The maid was a little flustered, then said her name was Lucy. The girl said her name, and Lucy asked what she wanted. But at that moment, the girl was simply happy that someone was smiling at her so kindly. After many years, this was very pleasant for her. Lucy said she was so glad to see the girl in a good mood. After all, she had been very worried about her all this time while she was asleep. The heroine became wary and thought, what was she talking about? Now she was curious, how long had she really slept? A moment later, an old man appeared in the doorway and asked if the girl had really woken up. Then he shouted for everyone to get out of the way. But suddenly, another man appeared in the doorway and asked why he was entering before the doctor. The old man said that he had indeed rushed, and then let his interlocutor pass. Then this young man entered the room, and everyone paid attention to him. He said he was very pleased to meet the miss. After that, with a smile on his face, he asked if he could check her condition. The girl, in turn, carefully examined this stranger, and his clothes seemed rather familiar to her. That's why she immediately became wary upon seeing him. At that time, memories from her life at the Duke's residence surfaced. During those moments when he conducted his experiments on her, a doctor would come and monitor her health. He always said she was healthy, and the man would state that he would then continue his actions. Every time before a lesson, he would come and examine her. Because of all these memories, the girl immediately grabbed the maid. She also thought that she didn't like this person at all. Lucy noticed that the heroine was wary and said that everything was fine as this person was a doctor. But the girl continued to be very cautious, and her frightened look told the young man not to approach her. Lucy again told the lady that this person would help her get better. The heroine, in turn, thought that if she weren't sick, the special lessons would start again. Suddenly, the young man addressed the girl and said that his name was Jalen Brown, and he was the family doctor of the Weavers. He also noted that she could simply call him Jalen. The girl thought, was he the family doctor? So, she was now in the Weaver house. Then she said that her name was Ariadne Eldier. The interlocutor, hearing this information, said he was pleased to meet Miss Ariadne. After that, he asked if he could examine her. The main heroine asked how long she had been asleep. The doctor told her that it had been literally more than 10 days. He also asked her to move carefully, as she had been bedridden for a very long time. As a result, her muscles were a bit unaccustomed to movement. The girl immediately thought that her father must be nervous because she had been gone for so long. She also thought that even though this person looked friendly, she was still a bit nervous. Jalen looked at the girl's hands and asked if she was right-handed. The heroine said that was correct, when the interlocutor added that that was good and he would finish his business quickly. After a short time, the doctor finally finished his actions and left the room. Then he asked the old man if he had seen that. He asked what he was referring to. Jalen asked if the young lady was afraid of him for no reason. The old man said he had seen it all, but it seemed to him it was because she was still too weak. He also noted that Gloria also hated doctors when she was very little. But suddenly, the doctor stated that something really didn't add up, and the man was surprised. Jalen stated that the girl's fear wasn't of bitter medicine or the treatment process, it was something more. That was because he had seen many children, but she was different. On top of that, she also had other injuries. The old man asked in surprise what other injuries and what was he talking about. The interlocutor remarked that the girl was right-handed, but she reflexively extended her left hand to him. And all this could mean that she never showed her right hand to doctors. He then asked the old man, when he brought the girl, had he seen the wounds on her hand. He noted that it seemed she had learned to hide all these injuries. The man asked, but who had inflicted them? Who dared to wound his niece? The doctor asked, wasn't it obvious to him? He also wondered, did the interlocutor think this could have been done without the Duke's permission? It turned out the girl had intestinal problems, and the injuries weren't only on her left hand, they were literally all over her body. That's why it sent shivers down his spine, just thinking about what the lady had been through all this time. With sadness in his words, he noted that no matter what the reason was, it was too cruel. When he looks at the lady's body and her behavior, he gets the impression that she was tortured. The old man at this time began to reflect that he had always thought the marriage between the Duke and Gloria was a good decision. The Eldier family was one of the most influential families in the empire, and the Duke's character was quite decent. There were rumors that the Duke adored his wife and daughter, and the old man thought she would be happy with him. But now, he realized that hope had been shattered. After he reflected on all this, the old man knocked on the door and told Lucy to leave him alone with the girl. The maid immediately agreed and went out. The main heroine looked carefully at the man and thought that only the doctor had spoken with her. So, this man was her uncle. She also looked into his eyes and thought he was angry. She wondered what would have happened if, after her mother became pregnant with her, she had stayed with her family. A moment later, the girl addressed the man and said she was pleased to meet Ernest Weaver. The man didn't expect the girl to speak first and was a little shocked by this. Then the heroine asked if she understood correctly that he was her uncle. Then she apologized for the trouble and noted that she would definitely thank him for taking her in. Ernest immediately told the girl that she thought so maturely for such a young age. Hearing his words, the heroine thought, had she been too bold? She also wondered if he would send her back if she behaved badly. That's why she decided she needed to apologize and did so. The old man sat down near the girl and asked what she was apologizing for. Then he stated that she had nothing to apologize for. A moment later, his gaze became less cold. Then he stated that he was the one who needed to apologize to Ariadne. After all, it turned out she had had a very difficult time all this while. That's why he was very sorry he hadn't noticed this earlier, and he apologized for not saving her. But now her uncle wouldn't let anyone hurt her. Then the man patted the girl on the head and said that everything would be fine now. The heroine, at that moment, thought, what was happening? She didn't understand, wasn't the man angry with her? Then the girl wanted to ask why the man was treating her so leniently. But he interrupted her and told the girl to call him uncle. He also added that this room now belonged to her. As a result, the girl could stay here as long as she wanted. The heroine asked, was it really her room? The man asked if it was too simple and apologized for it, all because this was all they had managed to prepare in a hurry. The main heroine said that, of course not, it was very much. The interlocutor asked, how was it too much? He, in turn, thought this room could never compare to the one she had in the duchy. But the girl told him that it wasn't so, because in her room there weren't even windows. Also, the room in the duchy was much smaller than this one. Hearing such words, the man immediately became thoughtful. The clothes Ariadne had been brought in were very showy, but now the girl was saying she lived in a room without windows. As a result, she was not only brutally beaten, but she also didn't live the life of a princess. Then he understood that the Duke had been pretending to be a loving father in public, and now he realized that that man seemed like a complete scoundrel. At that very moment, spiritual power began to emanate en masse from the man. The main heroine felt that she had become very cold. At the same time, she remembered that Sir Weaver was an elemental knight. Now the girl understood, so this was what spiritual power looked like. She had read about it in the novel, but feeling and seeing it was something else entirely now. The girl watched the man carefully and thought why he was sitting in silence. At that very moment, the man paid attention to her and saw that she was shivering as she breathed. She thought that spiritual power only started to break out when a knight was agitated. The old man realized he needed to get out of this room urgently. Then he addressed the girl and said he was glad she liked the room. Now she should rest and recover. The very moment the man was leaving, the girl asked why he wasn't asking anything. He, in turn, turned around and smiled sweetly at her. And he said there was no need to dredge up heavy memories, and it seemed she would tell him when she was ready. The main heroine still couldn't understand why everything was happening so simply. After all, she knew that in the novel, both the Grand Mage and Sir Weaver were not indifferent. She thought, why was this happening? Was it because of her blood? At that moment, the girl very much wanted to know what a real family was like. For her, family was just an illusion. Some kind of futile belief that a person would love her only because of blood ties. The heroine knew that in her past life, and in this one, there was nothing new. No matter how much she suffered, the Duke wouldn't give up on her. In the novel, there is an elixir that can purify the body. It's called glomus. It can make anyone an elementalist, but it's impossible to obtain without her. As a result, the Duke was only interested in her talent. Now the girl thought that if the man had problems with the Duke, he would also give up on her. As a result, the girl could rely only on herself. In enmity, conscience and sympathy are the first things to be discarded. Conscience is very heavy, and sympathy is simply priceless. And since she was being given such comfort, she would use it. At that very moment, the girl settled in well and tried to fall asleep. A moment later, sleep finally overtook her, and she closed her eyes. And at the moment the girl fell asleep, that very library she had been in appeared before her. There the heroine saw some other girl. She got up and immediately told Arya to come with her. Then the heroine followed her, and they sat down together on a stack of books. There were books from high school, and the heroine said it was just boring. That very girl greeted her, saying she was pleased to meet her. Suddenly the heroine addressed her and asked if she had been waiting long. She was also curious if this girl was glad to see her after so much time. The interlocutor, with immense joy on her face, immediately exclaimed that she was very glad. Then she asked Arya if she was sick. She was also curious if the lesson this time had been difficult. The girl told her that it wasn't so, because if she were sick, she wouldn't have come. The main heroine knew that this girl was the guardian spirit of this library. And so her interlocutor told Arya that she was very glad she had finally come to her. The girl understood that she must have been born together with the library. She knew how to read but didn't know how to speak. The first time the girl saw her, she asked if it wasn't a dream. Thanks to their joint lessons, this spirit very quickly mastered speech. However, she still found it difficult to form sentences with individual words. She really liked to read books about politics, and the girl asked if she liked that book. The main heroine thought that she had gathered all her knowledge from her past life, but she didn't know her own name, so she decided to give her a new one. She couldn't think of anything better and said her name was P. The girl's body endured constant pain from the special lessons, but thanks to P, who was always nearby, she managed to endure it somehow. Now the girl asked P if she had taken good care of what she had entrusted to her recently. The interlocutor immediately told her she was talking about the sparkling yellow and bright red ones, and it turned out she had hidden them very well. After that, the heroine asked her to bring them to her. The library's guardian spirit immediately ran off to carry out her instructions, and a moment later, she dragged the things the girl required. These were 2 vials with different contents and of different colors. The heroine knew that this library had turned out to be more useful than she had previously assumed, all only because one could bring and take any objects there. The girl said it was excellent work and thanked her interlocutor for it. At the same time, she thought that when she escaped from her father, she had managed to sneak these vials in here. After some time, the main heroine was feeling normal and the maid was dressing her. The woman also said she was glad her health had improved. The girl said that thanks to her, she would be able to dine with the sir. The maid noted that it had been many years since there were children in this house, so the clothes were a bit old-fashioned. But still, she had brought the best of what was available. Then she asked if they were too old and immediately apologized. The girl looked at herself in the mirror and said no, that she really liked them. At the same time, she looked at her dress and thought, didn't Sir Ernest have a son? Or why did he have this dress? After that, she thought that perhaps it was her mother's dress. While the girl was turning and examining herself in the mirror, the maid admired her. A moment later, she cried out that it was just too cute. After some time, they went together to where they needed to. At the same time, the heroine thought she felt somewhat strange. After all, she was now wearing a dress her mother had worn. And she was walking down the stairs she had run down in her own childhood. In her past life, the girl didn't know who her mother was and she had never seen her. After all, it turned out that in both her past and this life, she had lost them too early. At the same time, the girl thought she missed her so much. Suddenly, the maid announced to the man that the girl had arrived. He immediately looked at her carefully with his cold gaze. The heroine also looked at him and saw that his gaze was somewhat strange. After that, he turned away and said with sadness that he would call a seamstress and order new clothes to be sewn for her. The girl immediately thought that it seemed the man didn't like that she was wearing her mother's clothes. All this could be because she didn't look like her at all. In turn, Ernest felt immense sadness in his soul because he knew this was Gloria's favorite dress. On top of that, it suited the girl so well, and looking at her, he remembered his dear younger sister. At the same time, if one thought about it, the Duke hadn't even bought her proper clothes. The girl was his only niece, and she should wear the most expensive and beautiful things. He would go hunting personally for the fur for a coat. Sable or white fox would look absolutely wonderful on her. Suddenly, the man looked at the huge table and the distance between the girl and him. Then he thought, he knew it was just formality, but he couldn't even see his niece's face. As a result, he told his subordinate in a threatening tone to move the girl closer. The latter immediately said he would do it. Immediately after that, he approached the girl and told the lady to come with him. The girl immediately agreed. At the same time, she was about to enter her room, but suddenly heard the men start talking again. Ernest asked the butler if this person had come without warning. The butler remarked to him, but he was an Eldir after all. Hearing that this person was an Eldir, the girl immediately thought, had the Duke really come to take her back? After that, the girl entered her room and began to look out the window to see who had arrived. She reflected that she hadn't thought it would happen so soon. He had come earlier than expected. Also, the main heroine thought that she shouldn't panic, because she had a contract after all. That's why she understood that everything would be fine with her. A man had indeed arrived at the estate, and Ernest received him. This man said it was a great honor to meet Sir Weaver and that his name was Rictus Belbarda. He also noted that he held a special position among the Knights of the Golden Horn. Ernest remarked that for an elementalist knight, he was too modest. The interlocutor noted that he had understood that at first glance, but it was as expected from the shield of the north. Then the man asked if he was tired from the road. But at that very time, the young man who had arrived handed over an envelope and said it was a message from Duke Eldir. He added that he had heard many rumors about the Weaver snowstorms, but the reality had exceeded his expectations. All because it was terrible to get into trouble right during the journey. Then the old man asked the interlocutor if he needed a night escort. The latter noted that it was so, because the Duke was afraid he might neglect the lady. His master was very worried, so he had sent them to escort her. He had brought knights, as well as maids and a physician for the lady. Ernest took the message, crumpled it into a ball, and threw it right at the young man's feet. At the same time, he stated that there was no need for any of this. Rictus said he was very sorry, but his master had said not to leave the lady's side for a single step. After that, with a cold look, he asked where she was. The atmosphere in the room grew more and more tense, and Ernest said that she was resting and he shouldn't worry and should return home. The interlocutor at this time was persistent and stated that he simply had to see the lady. The man told him he had said no, and therefore he should leave. Rictus stated that this whole situation was rather strange. At the same time, he immediately asked why the man was hiding the girl. Then he asked if there was some reason why he couldn't see her. At that moment, he had a very smug smile and stated that Sir Weaver was so noble. At the same time, he asked if the man had imprisoned their lady somewhere. Ernest told him that everything he was saying was nonsense, and he wasn't like his master. The young man, hearing this, asked what he was talking about. At that very time, Ernest's knights burst into the room where they were, and he declared the conversation over. The envoy who had arrived was immediately seized, and he shouted that they would regret this. The man at this time ordered his subordinates to also seize everyone who remained outside. At the same time, he added that they should greet them all according to Weaver traditions. After some time, the main heroine was in her library. And she wasn't alone there, but as always, with the spirit P at the same time, the girl hadn't come empty-handed. She had brought treats for her friend. The box was already mostly empty, and the girl asked if she had liked it. P, with great joy, said that of course, it was very tasty. The main heroine stroked her interlocutor's head and said she hadn't known she liked such things. At the same time, she noted that next time she would bring her more. The interlocutor was very touched, and the girl told her not to cry at that moment. After a while, the heroine sat and thought that she felt so calm next to P at the same time. She remembered how scared she had been when she heard that people from Eldir had come. Now, she needed to find information about Erich Weaver. After a while, the main heroine realized she had found information about him, and this was his first appearance in the novel. At that very instant, her friend grabbed her by the hand and immediately shouted to Arya that she needed to leave urgently. She screamed that the girl was in danger, and therefore they needed to do it quickly. The heroine, connecting her thoughts, asked what danger. She also asked if her friend could see what was happening outside the library. P said she didn't know all that and simply had an anxious feeling. That's exactly why she continued to scream that she needed to get her out of there quickly. Then she used some technique, and by this action, she removed the main heroine from there. As a result of her friend's action, the girl found herself in her room and immediately came to. At that moment, she wondered, had P thrown her out of her own space? The heroine immediately wondered if she had known her friend could do that. A moment later, she looked around the room and thought why it was so dark. She became very curious, had she slept that long? Then the girl got up to look around and understand what was happening. At the same time, as she walked, she thought it was all strange because she definitely hadn't had dinner. So, if she hadn't been sleeping soundly, they should have definitely woken her for dinner. Also, her head was visited by thoughts about why P had said there was danger outside. When the girl approached the window, she realized it wasn't night at all, and she saw some kind of shadow on the window. This immediately alarmed her greatly, and she looked carefully to see what was there. At that very second, the window the main heroine was looking through shattered into pieces. A knight riding an eagle flew in through it. When that knight saw the girl, he said he had finally found the lady. The heroine was shocked at that moment and also blinded by the bright light. After some time, she examined the knight and realized he had the emblem of the Knights of the Golden Horn on him. At the same time, she wondered if this man was one of those who had arrived. The heroine also didn't understand what a Knight of the Golden Horn was doing here. The man immediately dismounted from his eagle and said they would save her and return her home. At the same time, he asked the lady to come to him. Frightened, the main heroine said that wouldn't happen because she didn't want to. At that moment, the interlocutor's expression changed, and he stated that he had wanted to take her the easy way. Then he added that it seemed he now had no choice, and then reached out his hand to grab her. But literally at the moment he was about to touch the girl, strange magic appeared. Because of the impending danger, the knight immediately retreated and saw what had alarmed him. After all, at that very moment, the old man, the Grand Mage, appeared in the room they were in. He asked the attacker how he dared to touch his granddaughter. The knight noted that he understood what kind of magic this was, so he was the Grand Mage. But then he stated that he didn't want to fight him, so he asked if he wouldn't rather return the lady to him. The old man told him that young people must not know what he was capable of, and the title of Grand Mage wasn't given to him for nothing. At the same time, he noted that if he left now, he wouldn't even kill him. The interlocutor told the old man that he still shouldn't underestimate him. Then he reached into his pocket and took out something. He took out that very flask with the red essence that polluted everything around. Then the young man tossed it up and, using his magic, shattered it so that it scattered throughout the room. The main heroine realized it was that very essence of pollution, and it couldn't be stopped by ordinary magic. That's why the girl rushed forward, in front of the old man, and tried to shield him with her body. The knight stood and watched carefully what was happening. Then he asked the old man what he was doing. All this he asked because the Grand Mage had covered the main heroine with his own body. And after that, he became angry and immediately began to use his magic. At the same time, he declared that he should read some books, because the stories of his battles with monsters had become history. The moment he used his magic, he directed it straight at the attacker's body. The young man, by some miracle, still managed to avoid the attack and even dodged, not suffering serious consequences. As a result, he realized that fighting the Grand Mage was beyond him and immediately took off. The old man watched him run away and asked where he thought he was going. Then he rushed after him, but through the window, he saw that the man had jumped on his eagle and was already flying very far away. That's why the old man decided that chasing him would be pointless now. After that, he turned to the main heroine and asked if she had no sense of fear at all. Then he ran up to her and asked if she had gone mad, because she absolutely shouldn't have done all that. He also asked her what would have happened if something bad had happened to her. The girl told him that she definitely wouldn't have died from such a thing, but the Grand Mage would have suffered. The old man continued to shout, why had she jumped out? At the same time, he was curious, did she take him for someone who needed protection from a little girl? Then he noted that it was he who should be protecting her. A moment later, he hugged the girl very tightly. Then he said he didn't understand whether she was behaving strangely or he was very old, but he didn't need saving. At that very moment, tears appeared in his eyes, and he said he would scold the girl. Several times, in a sorrowful voice, he said that Grandpa would scold her. At the same time, the heroine wasn't worried at all, because she felt it was very hard for her in the Grand Mage's embrace. After a while, the old man picked the girl up and carried her somewhere. At the same time, he told the girl not to worry. After all, even though her uncle was disagreeable, he was stronger than 4 or even 5 ordinary knights. The old man also noted that the uninvited guests had already been thrown out, and all this had happened according to the best weaver traditions. The girl asked if he was talking about weaver traditions. The interlocutor noted that in that case, only one enemy remained. So it turned out that all the other people had simply been maimed. Only those who could take care of their wounded comrades were left in one piece. That way, they could get home alive. He noted that guests should still be treated with all mercy. The heroine asked in surprise if everything would be all right after this. The Grand Mage noted that everything would indeed be all right. The heroine thought that the novel said Eldir was a powerful family with influence and wealth. So, wouldn't there be consequences? She wondered if they could stand against the Eldir family. The main heroine told the old man that the Duke would indeed be angry. The old man said, "Let him be." Then he told the girl that Eldir was just a bit richer, that's all. She remembered that in the novel, Erich Weaver's father rarely appeared. That's why she didn't know they were so strong. Suddenly, Ernest appeared and asked if it was his father. The old man, when he noticed him, immediately shouted about how these rats had penetrated the estate. The man asked what he was talking about. Then the father noted that he was so big but had the brains of a pea and complained about when Selina would finally return. The son asked if the father trusted his daughter-in-law more than his own son. The old man asked him if he had ever beaten Selina even once. Then he stated that he had lost 289 fights to her, and wasn't he right now? The man with the parting retorted that it was all because of his character. If he wanted to, she would never have won a single time. The old man noted that he was so proud now. The son at that moment stated that he simply had nothing to gain by winning against his wife. At the same time, he held out his hands to take the girl, but the father pushed him away. Ernest told the old man why he didn't just leave and give him the child. He said that he was always carrying her around, so why couldn't he carry her too? After that, the Grand Mage told the girl not to worry about her uncle and grandfather. After all, it turned out that children shouldn't have such sad faces. She just needed to be a carefree child. The girl immediately thought, a child. At that very moment, she remembered her past life in the duchy, where she was told that she was nothing like a child and that it was disgusting. She also remembered Ernest's words, who told her that she was only 7, not 17, and therefore she didn't have to behave like an adult. At the same time, she recalled that in the novel, Ariadne was a child destined to die. But still, she remembered her past life, and perhaps now she could survive. The unwillingness to surrender to death had given birth to these memories, but now she definitely couldn't be a simple child. All because she always needed to act cautiously. She was still a child and couldn't manage without help from others, but she couldn't stop doubting people's sincerity and was constantly wary. Sometimes the main heroine simply hated herself for all of this. After that, the girl apologized to the old man for not seeming like an ordinary child. The old man asked why she was sorry. At that moment, Ernest joined the conversation and addressed Ariadne. He noted that the girl had experienced things children shouldn't, and that was exactly why she behaved so maturely. Then he touched her face with his hand and noted that it was the adult's fault, not hers at all. On top of that, it was very sad that her childhood had been taken from her. The girl immediately thought, was it sad that she didn't behave like a child? The old man immediately told the girl that they didn't blame her for any of it at all. They just wanted her to rely on them. It made the old man sad when he saw her coping with everything on her own. The girl asked in surprise, was he sad that she didn't rely on them? The interlocutor noted that it was so, because he was, after all, her grandfather and uncle, and he asked, weren't they family to her? The main heroine thought that he had really said he was sad if she didn't rely on them, and now she wanted them to tell her to behave like a child, and to say they would protect her and that they would always be by her side. And then, perhaps, she wouldn't have to suffer alone. At that very moment, the girl began to cry sadly and asked if she could trust them. She also asked if she could rely on them and count on them. Then she hugged the old man very tightly, and he said that, of course, she could do all that. She also asked if she could stay here, and also if she could call this man her grandfather. The old man, in a very kind voice, told her that, of course, she could. And so the main heroine burst into tears and called him grandfather. At this time, Ernest addressed her and asked her to call him uncle. The old man at this time turned the girl the other way and told her not to pay attention to this person. The man was sad and called out to Ariadne. A moment later, he followed them, and the main heroine, seeing him, immediately called him uncle. Ernest liked this very much, and he was pleased. The Duke was in his estate and was furious about what had happened. At the same time, he understood that it had been reckless to send people into the territory of the Snow Leopard Knights, and that's why he had failed. Then he thought, wasn't this kidnapping after all? Even with the help of knights, he couldn't get his daughter back. It seemed the weavers were forcing him to take extreme measures. After that, he smirked and told his daughter not to be afraid, all because Daddy would definitely bring her home. Sometime after all those events, the main heroine was outside with her uncle. The girl was holding the man's hand, and he asked if it was cold outside and if perhaps she should go inside. But she told him she wouldn't because she wanted to meet her aunt and brother. While they were talking about all this, maids ran out and rushed to the lady. They had clothes in their hands, and they were saying that she had forgotten her gloves and that her nose was already red. Then one of them asked if they had brought the warmer made by the Grand Mage. The maid noted that the girl mustn't get cold, she needed to be careful. After all, she was so different from Master Erich, she needed constant supervision. She would get a nosebleed one moment, then faint the next. The man listened to everything carefully and then saw that the girl was finally dressed. Then he asked if they could finally set off, since the girl was fully ready. After some time, they finally set off. The maid stood and saw the girl off, telling her to return quickly. The heroine, in turn, looked at them and thought they were worrying too much. At one point, the man told Ariadne to take a step back and immediately stopped. Then he began to use his magic and summoned a snowstorm. At that very time, a beast appeared, running up to the man and staying near him. The main heroine understood that this was a contract beast, so it shouldn't be confused with an ordinary animal. Mages use spells to apply magic, but sometimes one can make a contract with a spiritual animal. This is magic possessing form. Such beasts are intelligent and borrow power from a great spirit. While the heroine was thinking about all this, she wondered if she would ever meet a spirit herself. Still, if one thought about it, the Weaver family also had a great guardian spirit. That's why she wondered if she would ever be able to see it. The man at that moment told Ariadne to come to him. After that, he picked her up and sat her in front of him on the snow leopard. As a result, they set off for the meeting they needed. On their way was a wall, and the man said they would now jump over it, so the girl needed to hold on tight. Then the magical animal easily jumped over the wall, and they rushed forward. Ernest looked at the road and said they had come just in time. The girl also looked ahead but realized she couldn't see anything. A moment passed, and in the distance, she too finally noticed that knights were approaching. The main heroine realized these were precisely the snow leopard knights. They were all moving on their contract animals, and they were flying and running on the ground. A knight who had been near the wall the whole time shouted that the conquest squad had finally returned. Ernest, along with his animal, jumped down, and there he immediately addressed Veronica. The girl, in turn, told the master that she had returned. He immediately asked if she had again thrown herself into the thick of it. The interlocutor hesitated a little, then noted that it was a little bit like that. Her name was Veronica Brandt, and she was a knight of the Snow Leopard. The old man noted that the girl should have washed the blood off herself first. She said that was indeed true, but it had just slipped her mind. And besides, she had been very lazy. Suddenly, she looked at the main heroine, who was near the old man, and asked what child this was. Ernest told her to watch her words, as this was his niece. The interlocutor jumped off her animal and noted that she hadn't known he had a niece. The man said he had written about it in letters and asked if she hadn't read them. The main heroine, at that moment, thought that this woman had so much blood on her that it was scary to see. Veronica held out her hands and joyfully declared that the girl looked just like a living doll. The old man shouted at her to wash the blood off first and then do something. While they were talking about all this, another woman rode up and remarked to Ernest that it had been literally half a year since they last met, and she was curious if he had missed her. This woman was named Selina Kizels, and she was the Countess Weaver. The man, the moment he noticed her, jumped off his animal and immediately rushed over. Then he hugged her tightly and joyfully said he had missed her so much. While they were admiring each other, another young man arrived on his eagle-like animal. He addressed the man and woman and noted that they had just met and were already being affectionate. Anyone looking at them might think they were newlyweds. This young man was named Erich Weaver, and he was the son of Count Weaver and a promising mage. But no matter what this young man said, the Count and Countess didn't stop their lovemaking. This angered him greatly, and he addressed them. He asked if they didn't think they shouldn't do this in public. The young man also noted that it was a miracle he didn't have a brother or sister. At the moment he was saying this, he noticed the main heroine out of the corner of his eye, sitting on the Count's animal. So he asked what this little thing was. At the same time, he was curious why she was sitting on his father's animal. The heroine looked at him and realized this was Erich Weaver, so he must be 16 now. But when the girl looked at him, he looked younger than in the illustrations in the novel. Veronica had been standing near her the whole time, saying she was a cutie and so small. For the young man, this was all incomprehensible, and he said, what was she saying now? He was curious, was she cute only because she was so small? After that, Erich came closer and said the girl was nasty, all because she had such huge eyes, and because of that, it seemed like he was looking at a bare skull. Veronica looked at him coldly and said that he wasn't cute either, which meant he was nasty too. The interlocutor told her to just look at him. Was she blind? The girl noted that he was indeed a nasty piece of work. This angered Erich, and he asked what she was slandering him for. After all, he was the future count. So it turned out she couldn't treat a future lord like that. Veronica turned around and added that if he really became count, she would just leave, all because he looked literally like a cow. This angered the young man, and he shouted for her to repeat that, but she had already mounted her horse and galloped away. At that moment, the young man and the girl exchanged glances. Then, angrily, he addressed the main heroine and asked what she was doing here. How dare she look at the Weaver heir like that? And also, he was curious how she dared to sit on the snow leopard. After that, Erich approached and grabbed the girl by the hand, stating that she needed to get down immediately. He also screamed that he had told her to get down. But suddenly, the Count approached and grabbed his hand, asking what he thought he was doing. Then the old man examined the girl and asked her if her hand was all right. She said she was fine, but the man looked at her carefully. There was a small wound, and he asked if that was really fine. Ernest addressed Selina and said he would go first, as he needed to take care of Arya. She, in turn, thought if the girl was in pain, and then said they would get acquainted a little later. The main heroine looked at Erich and thought he was still in his rebellious teenage years. After all, now he seemed even more unconstrained than she had seen him in the novel, and she thought, should she try to talk to him? At this time, the Countess was scolding him for what he had just done. After that, a small amount of time passed, and the heroine was together with the maid. The woman said that the master had gone to Erich and would probably punish him severely. She had also heard that he had been rude to the young lady, for which he deserved punishment. It seemed she should be careful in her encounters with Master Erich. The main heroine thought that she intended to become his friend, but their first meeting had turned out terribly. She also wondered who that girl was she had met earlier. For a few moments, she couldn't remember her name, then realized it was Veronica. The girl asked Lucy if she knew Veronica and if she was also a knight. The interlocutor asked if she was talking about Veronica Brandt. She was the same age as Master Erich. She had arrived here 2 years ago and had become a knight then. The other knights said that despite her age, she was very strong. The heroine thought, had this girl become a knight at 14? She understood that the main character of the novel, Axel Valentine, had become an elemental knight at 12. So, even though Veronica wasn't the main heroine, she was clearly a genius. Now the girl was tormented by the thought of why she wasn't mentioned in the novel at all. She was also visited by the thought that Veronica was very similar to Ariadne from the novel. Later, she reflected, perhaps she had died at the beginning. Then she remembered what Erich and Veronica had said when they discussed the main heroine and how they had argued. After a few moments of reflection, the girl realized she had remembered everything. According to the novel's plot, every time Erich got drunk to the point of losing consciousness, he would repeat these words over and over. Now the girl understood, was she his beloved who had died? Since ancient times, labyrinths populated by monsters had appeared everywhere, but people did not give up and continued to fight. However, the labyrinth that appeared several decades ago changed everything. It wiped out a mighty empire in an instant, and at that moment, a ray of hope appeared, which was the main character, Axel Valentine. The young man was the first person who managed to survive in the labyrinth, and his goal was to destroy the Great Labyrinth. Later, he came up with the perfect squad for his mission. It was to be a group of 5 people. His squad included a warlock, a mage, a witch, a priest, and an elemental knight. In the novel's plot, almost nothing is written about the roles of the priest and the elemental knight, and there is no information about Veronica either. But the main heroine was sure that she was the very talent who would take the knight's place. That's exactly why the girl needed to learn more about Veronica. Suddenly, the maid addressed her, and the girl asked what she wanted from her. The woman said that she should go into the room they had come to. The countess was sitting there, who said she was glad to meet Ariadne. She also introduced herself and said she was her aunt and her name was Selina Kizzles. The girl entered her room and immediately bowed, saying she was pleased to meet Madam. The interlocutor immediately laughed and noted, what kind of madam was she? The girl should call her aunt. Then she noted that the girl's uncle had sent her a letter, but it had gotten lost somewhere on the way. So, she hadn't known, but she had learned about the main heroine's situation. Even trained knights wouldn't have been able to go so far, and the girl's bravery deserved praise. She also stated that now she saw in the girl a warrior preparing for a new battle. The main heroine was surprised by such words and asked if she really looked like a warrior. The interlocutor noted that it was so, because a warrior doesn't always use weapons. It is, first and foremost, a person fighting for victory. The countess noted that her husband thought she was fragile as crystal, but it seemed to her that in such a small body unprecedented power was hidden, which was why she considered her a strong child. After that, she sighed sadly and said that she wished Erich were like her, but both of them only smiled sadly at each other. After that, the countess took out a box and, handing it to the girl, told her to accept this gift. She added that she had heard the girl had recently had a birthday. The heroine accepted it and thanked her, looking at it. The woman noted that she had prepared it in a hurry, so she wasn't sure if she would like it. The girl took out the gift and asked if it was a magic lamp. The countess said that it was and asked if she had had one like it. The heroine said she hadn't had one, and this was her first such item. The woman immediately asked in surprise if she was telling the truth. At the same time, she thought that by her age, the girl should have already received her first lamp. Even though she might spend a lot of time fighting monsters, even she knew such simple things. After all, it turned out every parent was obliged to give their child a magic lamp. Then the woman stood up and called the girl to her. She noted that since this was her first magic lamp, she must put it on. After that, she praised her and said that she had come so far, and it was just excellent work. Then, with a smile on her face, the woman told her not to be afraid, because she would soon get to know her uncle and grandfather better. It seemed they constantly came to her for advice. She also added that the girl could also turn to her if needed. The heroine asked in surprise if Auntie would help her. The interlocutor smiled and said that was all true, but let it be their little secret. Some time after that, the main heroine was walking alone around the estate. At the same time, the girl walked and thought why the countess had made such a promise to an ordinary child, although she understood that fortunately, Auntie had taken a liking to her. It turned out all her relatives were very good people. Thanks to her grandfather, she had finished the elixir she was holding in her hand. At the same time, she thought she still needed to test its effectiveness. If her body weren't so weak, she would have managed faster. She also thought, what was the point of being reborn as the Duke's child? If she hadn't remembered her past life, she would definitely have died. It turned out that, to be honest, she was really very cute, but at the same time, she looked too much like the Duke. At the same time, the heroine thought, wasn't it absurd that the world of the novel she had read turned out to be reality? After all, it turned out the author was a saint, and that was even stranger. Then she decided she had had enough of filling her head with nonsense. She wasn't thinking about the right things now. The heroine at this time was looking for something small to test the effectiveness of her elixir. Then, she turned her attention to a dying plant and realized that this polluted plant would suit her. After that, she approached it and realized that these had been daffodils before. Now, she very much wanted to see how effective her elixir would be. So, the girl opened the vial and poured a little liquid onto the plant. A moment later, the leaves, which had been completely wilted, began to revive and turn green. After a while, the whole plant was blooming as if it had just been planted. The heroine joyfully realized that her elixir worked effectively. While she was standing and rejoicing in her victory, a young man addressed her and asked what she was doing. The girl turned around and saw it was Erich. At the same time, she thought he was supposed to be training. Although she had been planning to meet him, it definitely wasn't now. But still, the girl greeted her brother Erich. He asked in surprise, what kind of brother was he? The girl asked, hadn't Uncle told him the whole situation? Erich stated that he had, of course, told him, so what? He didn't understand. At the same time, the young man came closer and stated, did she think that just because she was his cousin, he would treat her well? He added that she wouldn't get that and she shouldn't act as if they were close. The girl thought, why was this young man behaving so hostilely towards a child? Then she asked if he didn't like her. The interlocutor noted that was exactly the case, and the girl asked why that was. He stated that this place wasn't for playing at all, so the girl should leave here. The heroine noted that Grandpa had allowed her. Erich asked in surprise if he had really allowed it. Then he asked maliciously if she was learning magic from him. The main heroine said she didn't want that at all. But the interlocutor continued to shout, was she here to steal his magical techniques? He knew it. So, the girl wanted to find out all the secrets of her father's family concerning knighthood. Hearing such words, the girl thought that the novel said becoming a knight was difficult, but it seemed it was really true. Although she should behave very politely, she still didn't like how Erich was looking at her. So the girl addressed the young master weaver and said that she was the duke's heir, so he should be more polite to her. She also stated that he was her cousin, which was why she had been polite. And she asked, shouldn't he behave the same way she did? The young man asked in surprise what she was saying and asked if she wasn't 8 years old. The girl noted that he was indeed behaving rudely. At the same time, she understood that he must feel disrespect because, on the aristocratic ladder, a duke stood above a count, and therefore he should be polite to her. The heroine continued to ask if he wasn't being too rude. Erich was very angry at all these words and asked if she was really making fun of him. At the same time, he screamed for her to stop doing all this. After that, he leaned towards the girl and asked if her father knew she was like this. At the same time, he stated that perhaps he should tell him all about it. The heroine told him with a smile that she was, after all, saying she wasn't here to study magic. And it seemed she wasn't here to become an elemental knight either. So she was here only for an experiment. The young man asked what kind of experiment. The girl didn't listen to him and said she was leaving. The interlocutor tried to stop her and ask what kind of experiment it was, but it was unsuccessful. Then he paid attention to the revived flowers and realized they were daffodils. The main heroine was leaving and thought that she had moved around too much, so she needed to rest. Suddenly, the young man ran up to her and asked what she had really done with the polluted daffodils. The girl's condition was already poor, and she turned to look at him. Erich noticed the blood from the girl's nose and told her about it. The heroine tried to wipe it and noted that it was all right. It wasn't his fault, so he shouldn't worry. But the young man was frightened and said the blood kept coming. The girl said she was just a little tired, and at that moment, she collapsed. The young man didn't stand aside and managed to catch the girl so she wouldn't fall. After that, frightened, he put his hand to her forehead and realized she was burning up. Then he asked her to open her eyes, but the girl didn't respond. At the same time, he realized that if things continued at this rate, she would really die. The very moment the heroine lost consciousness, she thought about where she was now. A moment later, she saw P addressing her and saying she needed a break. Because of this phenomenon, she thought, when had she managed to get to the library? Her little friend continued to say that she wouldn't be harmed here, so she should rest. The girl asked her if she had dragged her into the library. The interlocutor noted that she didn't like it when Arya was in pain, so P had called her. The heroine thought in surprise if she could do that now. She became curious how her interlocutor was doing all this. So she wanted to address her, but felt she really wanted to sleep. Smiling P sat next to her and told Arya not to think about anything and just rest. As a result, the main heroine fell asleep because she was very sleepy. After some time, she woke up and heard someone shout that she was awake. Then she was addressed and asked if she was already awake. Immediately, the girl looked around the room she was in and realized it was her room. Then, she saw that the room was filled with countless people who were worried about her. The count was sitting near the girl, as well as the other people. The doctor saw that the heroine had woken up and thanked his colleague for his work. Then he asked if he could examine the lady. The interlocutor told him that, of course, he could do so. The count was immediately pushed away from the girl, and the doctor came over. After that, the young man examined her and noted that she had almost recovered. So, she could improve her health by doing physical exercises. The heroine sat and looked at her hands. At the same time, she thought about where such lightness in her body had come from. Ernest at this time ran up to the priest and, hugging him, thanked him for his work. The priest noted that it was all nonsense, as it was all thanks to God's gift. The girl noticed that this man had yellow eyes. At the same time, she realized that indeed all priests had yellow eyes. After all, she knew that if a person was endowed with divine power, that person's eyes would turn yellow over time. The man saw the priest out and noted that they needed to talk about the details. At this time, the countess approached and asked if the girl felt confused. She said she did. Then the interlocutor said she had slept for 2 days and asked if she wanted a snack. The heroine said she did, and suddenly everyone heard her stomach rumble. Hearing this, Selina immediately smiled and said they needed to set the table. The maid immediately ran off to do it and said to let her do it, so she would now bring the very best. At this time, the doctor addressed the main heroine and noted that he had doubts, but he still needed to tell her this. He also added that he had already told the countess about it. Then he stated that it seemed the girl had lost her sense of pain. The main heroine asked in surprise what that meant. The interlocutor noted that it meant that what was unbearable for ordinary people was, for her, no stronger than a mosquito bite. The girl asked, wasn't that a good thing? The interlocutor noted that, of course, it wasn't. The girl had to be careful because she might not feel pain, but that didn't mean the body wasn't suffering. Last time, when Master Erich wounded the girl, she hadn't felt any pain, even though the wound was bleeding. That's why all of this was abnormal. Before the nosebleed, she should have rested, but she hadn't felt the need. As a result, pain warns a person of danger. The girl's body didn't realize these warnings, and that was very bad. Therefore, the doctor urged her to always monitor the condition of her own body. The main heroine became a little wary, but then said she understood everything. Also, the interlocutor stated that, by the way, she should be feeling much better now. After all, thanks to the divine power, most of the consequences had disappeared. The girl asked if that meant she could walk anywhere. The doctor noted that, of course, it did, however, she shouldn't overdo it. The girl smiled and said she agreed with that. At this time, the countess was looking at the girl joyfully and wasn't even saying anything. After a while, the doctor said he would then leave, and the countess sat down next to the girl, telling Ariadne that this was wonderful. After all, it turned out she would soon become a completely healthy girl. After a while, only the countess remained in the heroine's room with her. The woman was feeding the girl and said that this scoundrel Erich had said he would reflect on his behavior. At the same time, she said he was just fooling around but definitely wouldn't harm her. But still, that didn't mean evil people couldn't be hiding nearby. That's exactly why they needed to take care of her safety and choose nights for her protection. The girl asked what nights, and suddenly the countess said that someone was entering the room. The door to her room swung open, and Veronica Brandt entered and introduced herself to her. The girl looked at her and thought, was this Veronica? She really hadn't expected to see her here. Selina noted that even though Veronica looked young, her abilities were simply amazing. After that, the woman addressed her and asked if Erich behaved badly towards Arya, what would she do? The girl said that she still wouldn't allow her to suffer, and the woman said that she could hit him as much as she wanted, just not to break any bones. The interlocutor said she understood all that. At this time, the main heroine thought, were they really relatives? The heroine asked if, perhaps because she had fainted, someone had scolded Erich. So she cried out that it definitely wasn't his fault, because he had really helped her. Selena said that she knew herself that he had immediately run to Jalen, but he had said it was his fault. That's exactly why he had honestly confessed to everything he had done. At that moment, the heroine thought that she herself hadn't known he had such a character. After that, she said that in reality, it hadn't been like that at all. After all, it turned out she had simply overexerted herself. The Countess noted that Erich knew she would say that. Nevertheless, he had his own opinion on the matter. She also stated that the fact that he had admitted his guilt himself was simply wonderful. At that moment, the girl imagined Erich reporting to his mother about it. After that, a small amount of time passed, and the girl was in her room. On her table stood the vials with that wonderful elixir. She said she would give one to her uncle and one to Erich, and she still had 2 left. Then she thought about whether she should give one to Veronica and one to P. Of course, it wouldn't bring any benefit to P, but she was constantly in the library. So this was the first elixir she had prepared, so she very much wanted to give it to P as a gift. The girl liked the thought that she could give someone a gift. She also remembered that she had asked her friend to find information about Veronica, and she hoped P had found something. So she thought she needed to ask her how she had dragged her into the library last time. Then the girl sat down in a rocking chair to fall asleep and go to her library. When the main heroine ended up in the library, she didn't see her friend there and started looking for her. For some time, she looked around and didn't understand where she was. After all, it seemed she was always waiting and hugging her. Now the girl was shouting for P to come to her. The girl walked and suddenly heard someone addressing her and calling her over there. The heroine looked back and saw P there, calling Arya and telling her to look. But still, the girl looked and didn't understand where she was because there were very many bookshelves there. When she finally found her interlocutor, she thanked her, and she had a book in her hands. At the same time, her friend told the girl that she had discovered something very interesting. After that, P ran up to the main heroine and said here was the very book she had been looking for. So, it contained completely new information. At this time, the main heroine looked to the side and saw a glass wall there. The girl couldn't get to the other side, so she asked her interlocutor if she could go to the other part. Then she asked what other part, or was she talking about this part of the memories? She also asked if the heroine couldn't go there. The girl told her she couldn't. And smiling, she reached her hand there and said that if Arya couldn't, then P could do it. When the guardian spirit crossed to the other part of the memories, the girl stopped hearing her. That's why she asked her interlocutor what she was saying, because the girl couldn't hear her at all. The heroine also asked why she hadn't said she could do that. P looked out from the other part and said that Arya hadn't asked, so she hadn't talked about it all. Then she asked if Arya was angry and would scold her. The girl said that, of course not, because she wasn't angry with her at all. After that, she addressed her and asked if the other parts were similar to this one or if they were different. The guardian spirit asked what other parts. The heroine told her she meant the rooms filled with other people's memories. P asked what other rooms or people she was talking about. Then she stated that Arya was the only one here. So, in this entire library, the girl was the only visitor. The heroine asked if she was really the only one. Then her interlocutor's mood changed, and she said sadly that P waited every day for her to come. The girl noticed this, and, apologizing, said she would try to come more often so she wouldn't feel lonely. A moment later, her interlocutor looked very joyful, and she said here was the very information the girl had been looking for. She also added that she had had to sweat for this little book. The heroine noticed her changing mood and thought how quickly it changed. After that, the heroine took the little book and asked if she was talking about information about Veronica. P noted that it was so, because her trusted person was Arya's Veronica. The main heroine familiarized herself with the information carefully and thought, was this a report on the battle in the Lamacha labyrinth? The girl thought, wasn't that the labyrinth located in the Weaver domains? So, the defense had been destroyed after the defeat, and as a result, the monsters had caused significant damage to the city. Veronica Bart was a knight of the Snow Leopard and was 24 years old. According to the plot, she died protecting Erich Weaver from a monster called the Bloody Hunter. After receiving the information, the girl thought that if Veronica was 24, This would happen in the future, but something didn't add up in her head now. At that instant, P addressed the heroine and said she had found all 10 volumes of the novel, but Veronica's name didn't appear there. That's exactly why she decided to look in other books. The girl realized that P hadn't found any information about Veronica in the original novel. Then she thought that she had searched the entire library and only found this. There was information about everyone here, but it was about the present, not future events. The Library of Illusions was a place where all the memories of her life were stored, so P knew everything about this world. She possessed information about everything and wasn't limited by time frames, unlike her. The heroine understood that perhaps P was an entity with access to any knowledge, and that was complete cheating. At this time, her friend asked if she had brought the wrong thing and if this was a failure and a mistake. The main heroine said that it wasn't at all. Everything was fine, and she thanked her for this information. The guardian spirit immediately rejoiced and said she was great. Arya addressed her again and asked if she could find something else for her. The interlocutor noted that, of course, she could, because she was very bored. She also asked what Arya wanted to know from her. The heroine immediately said that she needed information about the death of Gloria Weaver. The guardian spirit joyfully hugged her and said she understood everything. The girl thanked her in advance. Then she remembered her magic elixir, the one she wanted to give as a gift. So she took out the named vial and addressed P after that. She handed it to her and noted that she had made it for the first time. Her friend saw it and was delighted because there was a ribbon with her name on it. A moment later, she untied it and asked for Arya to tie it on her head. The girl said it wasn't that kind of ribbon and it would be better to leave it on the vial. This didn't stop the interlocutor, and she asked again. As a result, the heroine had no choice but to agree with joy. After that, she tied the ribbon on her, and P was joyful. She preened in front of the main heroine and asked if she liked it. Some time later, the main heroine was in the courtyard with Veronica. The girl took out her magic elixir and gave it to her. Veronica noted if the girl had made it herself. The heroine said that was true and she should use it when she was wounded. She could drink it or pour it on the wound. The girl was pleased by this, and she thanked the heroine. Then Arya addressed her interlocutor and noted that she had just wanted to meet her brother. Now she was curious why they were now on her contract beast. Veronica noted that it was because going up the stairs was a bit of a hassle. Then she hesitated a little and said she just wanted to hug the girl one more time. At that very time, the horse stepped on a roof tile and knocked it down. The girl noted that the tile had broken, and now the shouting would start again, telling her to use the stairs and not her contract animal. Indeed, Erich ran out and shouted how many times he had told her to use the stairs. Then he told them to get down, and immediately the horse began to move downward. The young man hadn't expected such actions and was a little frightened after the landing. Veronica told him that he had said to get down, so why was he twitching? Erich noted that it was because she had landed right next to him. He was angry and shouted that she had done it on purpose. After that, he calmed down a bit and noticed the main heroine sitting next to her. That's exactly why he shouted, how could she bring this brat here, and on her contract beast at that? He asked if she had gone mad. The girl didn't listen to him and simply told her iron horse that it was free. After that, Veronica moved closer to the young man and grabbed his clothes. At the same time, she asked if he had called the little lady a skull, and the young man noted that it was exactly so, because it suited her. He also asked if the interlocutor didn't recognize him as the future count at all. The main heroine smiled and told Nika to let him go. She agreed, but pulled the young man from the elevation. The girl said that wasn't what she had meant and asked her to just put him back where he had been standing. Veronica did so, and the young man got angrier about it. At the same time, he said the girl was so strong. At that very time, the heroine approached him and said this was a gift. The young man asked in surprise what gift she was talking about. The girl noted that this vial contained an elixir she had prepared herself. Erich noted, what elixir? Was it that experiment she had talked about? The young man was a bit embarrassed by such a gift, and the girl noted that he could learn the details about it from Grandpa. Then the main heroine addressed him and said she wanted to apologize. Erich was very surprised and asked what she was saying. The girl noted that she had fainted, and it definitely wasn't his fault, but he had taken responsibility, and she didn't understand why he had done it. She also asked if it seemed like he didn't hate her after all. The young man shuddered and asked what she was saying. How could he not hate her? Did she want him to get angry? Veronica immediately approached him and grabbed his clothes. The young man asked if she was doing it again and what she wanted from him. The interlocutor told him to just watch his words. Then Erich turned around and said they were annoying him, and he was leaving. The main heroine at that moment thought he was strange, but still, he wasn't that bad. Veronica told her not to listen to that ungrateful person. After all, it turned out he simply wasn't worthy of her gifts. The girl immediately smiled sweetly and said that it wasn't so, because she thought she had done everything right. Some time later, the heroine was dining with the Count and Countess. The girl gave them vials with her elixir, so they asked if it could really cure pollution with its help. They were also curious if it was effective not only on plants. The girl said it could indeed cure all living things. Ernest noted that all of this was enough to surprise him greatly. The Countess also added that she was so sorry she didn't know how to use it all. Then she addressed the girl and asked if the elixir could accurately identify polluted areas. So she was very curious if the land would heal when they cleared the labyrinth and used this elixir. The man told his wife that Arya had said it only worked on living organisms. The woman noted that soil nourished plants, and living and dead soil were completely different things. Ernest asked if she really thought it was possible. Then he asked, what about all the insects? Selina asked the main heroine if this elixir worked on soil. The girl noted that they knew, but they would need to test it. At that moment, she thought that the elixir really did work on soil. But still, when she saw it, the information was very accurate, which was rather strange. The Count noted that they really should try it. If it turned out to be effective, they could start manufacturing more of it. Then the man asked Arya if she could prepare several samples at once. The heroine noted that it wasn't difficult, but they should keep this information secret. After all, it turned out that if they made a wrong move, their relationship with the temple would be completely destroyed. Selina, because of this, asked then if she had an idea how they could distribute the elixir. The girl noted that first, she wanted this elixir to be sold on the black market, and when rumors about the elixir spread, they would donate the recipe to the temple. Moreover, they would do it publicly. Some time later, an eagle flew to the Grand Mage, and on its leg was a message from the Count. The old man read it aloud and noted that she had said so. At this time, a woman was sitting in his room, listening to everything he said. At the same time, the old man asked what she thought about it. The woman sitting in the room was named Rebecca Garcia, and she was the head of the Garcia family. She noted that it meant that after they sold part of it on the black market, they planned to give the recipe to the temple. And she was curious, so they would do it when the rumors had already spread throughout the area. At the same time, she said it was all very intriguing. The Garcia family, whose direct descendants and territories had almost disappeared after the appearance of the Great Labyrinth. A lineage experiencing difficulties was called upon by the upper class thanks to Solon Garcia's second child, Rebecca. Having inherited the position of head of the family instead of her father, who was interested in neither money nor business, Rebecca became the current head of the family, both by title and in real life. Rebecca asked the old man what she had said about the donation. The man noted that she had said it was the Duke Elder's recipe, and she was planning to donate it to the temple because she thought it was wrong to monopolize it, as her father had wanted. So it turned out that Ariadne didn't even want payment for it. However, if the temple tried to profit from it, she planned to distribute the recipe on the market herself. The girl asked if she didn't intend to make the elixir anymore after donating the recipe to the church. The old man noted that it wasn't so, because after that, she wanted to set up its mass production. Rebecca thought that if they donated the recipe to the temple, it would mean they would get not only the church's trust, but also honors for giving up wealth for the sake of the whole world. And if they prepared in advance for mass production, having the recipe, they could release it to the market faster than the temple itself. So, this was an item that was hard to get even on the black market, a miracle-working elixir recognized even by the temple. If they released it on the market, it would sell like hotcakes. Thanks to such a donation, they could announce that the creator of the elixir was Ariadne. If only they and the church had the recipe, it would save them from competitors. Also, a moderate price would create a huge fortune for them. Rebecca asked the old man how old the girl was now. Solon asked if she didn't even know how old her niece was. The girl immediately addressed her assistant, Fortin. The young man bowed and noted that the girl had turned 8 this year. Rebecca asked if she was 8 years old. Then she addressed her father and said she wanted to raise her, and she needed the girl to be her niece. The old man noted that his head was already hurting and asked what his daughter was even saying. He added that, it turned out, this child was the heir of Duke Elder. The girl noted that she really couldn't say anything against that. Probably nothing could be done about it, but she couldn't refuse to sell the elixir. The old man noted that he simply didn't have the right to make such a decision. After all, it turned out he had just come to talk to her because she had asked him to recommend someone through whom they could sell the elixir. Further, it all depended only on Ariadne. The daughter asked if that was really true. Was it really worth letting a child make such decisions on her own? After all, it was his and her brother's duty to look after her at this age. The old man noted that, of course, they would have done so if Arya were an ordinary child. But Ariadne had poured charged water on her hand to demonstrate the elixir's effect on herself. So, since she had offered them a deal to hand over the elixir in exchange for her protection, they had decided to respect her decision. The girl listened to all this and took a deep breath. At the same time, she said she was indeed like Gloria's daughter. This determination and purposefulness were just like her mother's when she ran away from home to become a duchess upon coming of age. The way she tries to break free from her father's clutches or tests the elixir on her own body. She is just like her mother. Then Rebecca noted that she just hoped her fate would be better. The old man was shocked by what she was saying now. The girl continued and said that if one thought about it, it was true that before her departure, Gloria had once contacted her. It was a short note with a place and time to meet. She said she didn't want anyone else to know about it and asked to keep it all secret. The old man asked what had happened in the end. The daughter said they hadn't met because her dear little sister hadn't come after all. She waited the whole day at the appointed place, but she never showed up. Later, during her investigation, she managed to discover that her sister had died in an accident. The old man immediately jumped up and asked why she hadn't told him about this before. The interlocutor noted that because of his doubts, she had conducted her own investigation. After all, the outcome was the same. It was an accident. She was curious about what she had wanted to tell her then. Now it seemed she could guess. Gloria couldn't stand the abuse from her husband, and if it had come out, a divorce would have been unavoidable. But Ariadne was a completely different girl. The father had tried to force Gloria to give up the child before she ran away. At the same time, there were rumors that Duke Elder was a womanizer. After they got married, it seemed he had settled down, but that was hard to believe. The old man, after hearing this whole story, said he understood everything, and so it had all been because of him. The daughter said she knew he would blame himself, which was why she hadn't told him about the letter earlier. The father noted that it wasn't so and thanked her for sharing it with him. Then Rebecca told him to cheer up because she had invited her to meet her niece. The old man told her to go without him because he wasn't planning to return for some time yet. The daughter asked why, since she thought his work in the capital was finished. The Grand Mage noted that it was because of the document in his hands. The girl looked at it and asked if it was the guardianship certificate for Ariadne. After that, Rebecca thought, had the Duke admitted that he had tortured her. No matter what evidence they presented, it would be difficult, simply incredibly difficult, to challenge his paternal rights. The old man said he had taken it from the Duke's house. The daughter immediately cried out, had he stolen the certificate from him? The father asked her not to shout like that and not to worry because he had persuaded the emperor. He had done it in exchange for teaching some members of the imperial family. Hearing this, the girl only laughed and asked if Elder was so insignificant. At the same time, she noted that she hadn't known the old man's knowledge could be so useful. The old man noted that he agreed that the Duke was a complete nobody. As a result, Rebecca thought the situation was very serious, but so far, so good. Still, no one knew what would happen later, and she didn't believe Gloria had died by accident. After all, it seemed to her it was because of a special poison that left no traces. She also thought, wasn't that why Ariadne wanted to donate the elixir to the temple? After all, if the existence of the elixir became known to all, then perhaps the truth would really be revealed. Then the girl stood up and told her father that she had prepared the guest room, so he should go and rest. The old man asked where she was going. The interlocutor smiled and said she was going to her brother's. She wanted to see her clever niece as soon as possible. At the same time, she thought that no child under 10 could think in such a way. However, she wanted to meet in person the child who had come up with such a grand plan. Some time later, she was already at the estate where the main heroine lived. She asked the butler if she had heard correctly. Then she asked if it was true, was he saying that they had gone on a picnic without preparation and without warning. Rebecca, along with her subordinate, went out to that very picnic where the others had gone. At the same time, she said she couldn't believe that Brother Ernest and his wife had gone on a picnic. She had heard he had done so only once with Erich, and this was something new. The girl at this moment was right near them. At the same time, she looked at her brother and thought, was this the old and kind Ernest? He was smiling sweetly. She also looked at Selina and realized that even their strict knight was also smiling. But at the same time, Erich was sitting silently and sullenly. Then her gaze switched to Veronica, and the two of them made eye contact. The main heroine's protector immediately looked at her maliciously. Rebecca at that moment told her to wait, because they weren't enemies after all. Selina approached them and told Veronica that everything was all right. At the same time, she asked her if they had never met before. And at that moment, she greeted dear Rebecca. Ernest stood up and said he had known she would come but hadn't expected her so soon. At this time, Erich stood up and told his aunt that it had been a long time since they last saw each other. Rebecca greeted everyone and told her beloved nephew that he had gotten even taller and that this wreath suited him perfectly. The young man was embarrassed by this. After that, the woman looked at the main heroine, that this was probably her dear niece. The girl immediately bowed to her and said she was pleased to meet her aunt. At the same time, she introduced herself and gave her name as Ariadne Eldir. The woman immediately approached the girl and poked her cheek with her finger. Ernest ran up to the girl and grabbed her, asking his sister what she was doing. The sister noted that she just wanted to make sure she was alive because the girl looked too much like a doll. Veronica, at this very time, said that she had thought so too and wanted to touch the lady. At this time, Erich addressed the girls. He said that before touching this girl, they needed to wash their hands. They immediately thought, had he really said that? He said that he had said it and didn't understand what was so strange about it. The aunt said that it wasn't important at all because she had come to meet her beloved niece. At the same time, she asked the girl if she hoped she didn't mind. After these events, a small amount of time passed, and they had all returned to the estate. The heroine was sitting with her aunt. Rebecca said she had already heard her story from her father. But first, she was curious if the girl wanted her to talk to her as her aunt or as the main shareholder of Garcia. The main heroine realized this woman's name was Rebecca Garcia. So, her name practically never appeared in the novel, all except for one single line where it was mentioned that she was Erich's aunt. The girl thought that she could still completely trust her mother's older sister. At the same time, she understood that, of course, she had asked her grandfather to find someone like that for her, but she hadn't expected him to send Rebecca to her. The problem was that the novel wouldn't help her here, and she knew nothing about this woman. Now she simply had no particular choice. The heroine asked what the difference was between an aunt and a shareholder. The interlocutor asked what the difference was between a polite lie and a kind lie. The girl asked, but wasn't any lie bad? The aunt noted that if a merchant didn't lie, it meant he was stupid or had special plans for her. To avoid problems, she had to learn to distinguish lies, but since she was her niece, she should help her with it. Then the main heroine asked what the difference was between a polite lie and a kind lie. The interlocutor noted that she could tell her, but wasn't there a better way than just an explanation? Hearing such words, the girl understood that she had been preparing for the meeting, but she was secretive and couldn't be understood at all. She knew she should answer the question, but she didn't understand what to do. Now she had a choice before her. Which option should she take? A moment later, the thought came to her that perhaps she was just thinking too much about all this. She wondered if Rebecca Garcia had really come to have a serious talk with her. So she understood that the woman thought she was just an 8-year-old niece. Besides, she was her mother's older sister. At the same time, this was a person worthy of trust, chosen by her grandfather himself. But she had thoughts, could she really trust her? As a result, the girl asked her aunt if she was really just teasing her. The interlocutor said, how could she laugh at her future partner? After all, if she were provided for, then something bad would happen. The girl looked at her expression and thought she really was teasing. Then the heroine noted that she wasn't that stupid. This made the aunt laugh very much, and she said she had been afraid she might be a genius, but she was just such a cutie. The girl heard all this and realized she was simpler than she had thought before. After that, Rebecca said she liked her very much, and she asked what her opinion was. She was curious if she had passed the test. The girl noted that her aunt was a liar. The woman noted, how could she say that when she had just said how cute she was? And she asked, couldn't the girl see how sincere her eyes were now? The girl took a deep breath and said she didn't believe it. Then she stated that anyone who asked to look into their eyes to check their sincerity was a fraud. Rebecca was surprised by this and asked where she had heard all this. The heroine said it was from her mother. The aunt smiled and said she had known it. After that, she said that when they were children, after jokes, she always told her to look into her eyes and check if she was honest. And every time her sister answered exactly as the girl had answered now. At the same time, the heroine realized her aunt had heard these words in childhood. A moment later, Rebecca said it was time to show what she had brought. She had a huge stack of papers in her hands, and the girl was surprised. The woman said it was a contract, and it included the sales plan she had proposed. She told the heroine to list all the materials needed to create the elixir and also indicate how many people would be needed for it. At the same time, she shouldn't rush at all and would be better off discussing it all with her uncle and aunt. She also handed over more papers and said this was an application. At that moment, she asked the heroine what else was needed for successful business. And a moment later, she noted that a competent person was needed who would attend meetings on her behalf and help with affairs. This person would be her personal secretary. Then the woman said her aunt had picked the very best, so she should choose whoever she liked. The girl thought she hadn't expected that at all. After that, she smiled and thanked her aunt. Rebecca smiled again and noted that she was so cute. She also added that if she needed anything, she should tell her immediately. After all that was left was to organize branches throughout the empire. The girl, at that moment, thought she had almost forgotten one important thing. That's exactly why the heroine addressed her aunt and asked if she could ask her to find someone. The woman was surprised and asked who she was talking about. The girl said it was that very person she wanted to support. At that same time, a young man was wandering around the city and thought he was very hungry. At the same time, he knew he hadn't eaten anything for several days. This entire territory was polluted. There was no food or water. But still, an orphan had no choice. One could become a messenger or a waiter, perhaps even a mercenary. The young man approached one of the knights and told him he needed work. The interlocutor immediately told him he should just give up because no one liked him at all. The young man asked him to give him a chance because he wouldn't disappoint. The man said he would have taken him if he were older by, say, 3 years. The young man asked if skills depended on age and simply asked him to give him a chance. This angered the man, and he shouted that he was just a pesky brat. Then they crossed swords with him. The knight told him to listen carefully because he wouldn't last even against a monster from the lowest level. So he was curious what use his skills were. With such a puny body as he had, he would just die. He said he was just a boy, so he should get out of here immediately. At that moment, the young man didn't answer and simply turned his sword. The opponent didn't expect that and thought, had he really just turned the sword in front of him? The next instant, the young man's weapon was at his opponent's throat. He told the knight not to be afraid because a speeding carriage would inevitably hit a stone. The young man also said that these words suited this situation very well. The interlocutor asked who had taught him all this. The young man said he had learned it from his late father. So, his home was in the very center of the current labyrinth, and since childhood, his adoptive father had taught him the art of swordsmanship. After his father's death, the young man wandered alone. As a result of all this, by the age of 12, he was accustomed to fighting various monsters. The interlocutor told him that was a rather interesting story. He also said that he really had good combat skills. At the same time, he added that if he wanted to earn money, he should go to the clothing shop in the alley. When he went there, he should say he wanted to become a commodity. After all, perhaps there were still people who could support him. As a result, if they liked him, he could earn money that way. After this dialogue, the young man immediately ran off to that very place. The knight thought this kid was just a scoundrel, so he hoped they would like him and make him a plaything for the rich. After some time, the young man ran to that place and realized it was the shop the gatekeeper had told him about. But it looked like it was about to collapse. When he entered, the smell of old clothes and leather immediately hit him in the face. There he saw only an elderly woman, to whom he said he wanted to become a commodity, and as a result, she calmly pointed her finger at the storeroom door. However, when he opened that door, he didn't see any fabrics there. Behind the door was an entirely different world. The young man saw a man sitting at a luxurious table, and the whole room looked even more luxurious. The man told him to stay where he was, or he would dirty the floor. He also asked the young man how he had found out about him. The hero thought, was this the owner of this establishment? Then he told him he wanted to become a commodity. The man smiled and asked if he thought one could become one just like that. Again, he asked who had sent him here. The young man had the thought that he would support him, but it seemed he didn't like him. The man noted that he wasn't answering, but never mind. The hero wondered if he was too small for them. At that very time, the owner of the establishment told him to come closer to him. Then he examined his eyes and asked if he had red eyes. Eyes the color of raging flame, cursed eyes. Such children were called red-eyed, and they were extremely rare. Many people with such eye color died in childhood, and the cause of their death was fire. After all, people said that fire spirits loved such children. However, it was precisely because of such spirits that fires often broke out. That's why people came to hate children with red eyes. The hero thought that perhaps that was why his parents had abandoned him. At the same time, he hadn't learned about his birth parents from his adoptive father. And so the young man thought, was the man disturbed by the color of his eyes? At that moment, the man said they were genuine red eyes and looked at the young man with interest. He asked the older man if he wasn't afraid of red eyes. The owner of the establishment asked if one could be afraid of such things. Then he noted that he wanted to ask him something, and he asked if he knew that fire spirits really loved children with red eyes. So, that meant he had a high chance of becoming an elemental knight. After that, the interlocutor patted the young man on the head and said he believed in him and would try to support him. Then the hero thought that now, for the first time, someone besides his late father was patting him. And so, for the first time, he didn't hate his eyes. The man asked if the young man wanted to stay with him until he grew up. After all, if he felt like it, he could always just leave. The hero, at this time, thought that he didn't want to sleep on the ground anymore, and so if he stayed here, everything would probably be fine. That's exactly why he told the man that he wanted to stay here and asked him to allow it. The interlocutor noted that, of course, he would let him stay, but he should sign a contract here. At this time, he thought that red eyes were such luck for him. The hero thought if he could now earn money quickly or get a warm and clean place. The owner of the establishment was delighted and thought he needed to figure out how to use this young man. After all, it turned out he now completely belonged to him because of the contract. Then the man told the young man that he really had a good name. He also said, "Welcome to the Chess Association, Axel Valentine." The Chess Association was a place where association members sponsored promising people as their property. In the association, talents could be bought out, and in people's eyes, This was noble help for young talents. But still, in reality, this association engaged in ordinary slave trade. Many children whose parents had died fell into slavery. If a talent refused to participate and wanted to leave the association, his owner would demand the return of all funds spent on raising the young man. It was an obvious fact that no one could pay off this debt. After all, the children grew up in terrible conditions, and the main character of the novel, Axel Valentine, was such a talent who had lived in the association for a long time. Axel's owner was a man named Robert Black. He was a villain who manipulated the main character and earned money from him. Nevertheless, Axel didn't object, and he trusted Robert and followed him as his adoptive father. But in response to all this loyalty, Axel was deceived. As a result of this whole story, he barely survived and escaped. In the future, the hero would become stronger, and he would take revenge on the association by killing Robert. The main heroine had read the book and understood that such was the novel's plot. So, she wanted to help the main hero, and it would be good to save him from that very association. After all, the girl knew that if everything went according to the original novel's plot, then in the end, the world would be completely destroyed. As a result, everyone, including herself, would be dead. The main hero, Axel Valentine, could still save the world because not all was lost yet. Also, the main hero had the ability to return to the past. This ability of his activated in moments of extreme danger. Axel returned countless times and in the end couldn't take it and went mad. That's exactly why he couldn't fix the ending, and as a result, the world was completely destroyed. The main heroine understood that to prevent Axel's endless returns and the world's collapse, she should make Axel strong immediately. At that very time, someone knocked on the door leading to the girl's room. The heroine said to come in. A man was there, and he said he had just finished with work. This man's name was Simon Danet, and he was the secretary Rebecca had helped find. The girl understood that, judging by the documents, he was indeed a very reliable person. Still, he was someone unusually loyal to money. The girl knew this man would be loyal as long as he was paid. She understood that many proposals had come from her aunt, but she was still glad she had chosen this particular young man. Then the girl said he had returned quickly, which meant he deserved a small bonus. That's exactly why she held out a pouch of money to him and asked him to take it. But the young man said he didn't need it because he would only accept this reward after checking his own work. The girl said that was fine and then began to examine his work. At the same time, the girl understood that the work, as always, was literally ideal. She also thought about how to make the main hero strong without harming him in the process. So, she needed to steal the role of Robert Black, who was a member of the chess association. So, she needed to become the Robert who led Axel and then betrayed him. After all, it was Robert who contributed enormously to the main hero's development. And to take on such a role, she had ordered Simon to buy out Robert's share in the association. As a result of all this work, the main heroine was able to see the list of everyone under Robert's patronage. As the girl had expected, Axel's contract was here. Now she needed to provide the main hero with the very best. The tasks would remain as difficult as before, and she wouldn't change the betrayal that spurred the main hero on either. Still, the girl didn't want to deceive him, but she would have to do it all. So, it needed to be done only so that the main hero would become stronger afterward. The girl told Simon it was just excellent work he had done. She also noted that from this moment on, he should act as a member of the chess association. At the same time, he would need to carry out her instructions. Of course, the salaries of the association representative and the secretary would be paid to him separately. The young man said he would do everything in his power. The main heroine also said that no one should discover the connection between the representative and her. And so, she was curious if the young man could hide their cooperation. The interlocutor said that, of course, he could do that because no one would know he was working for an 8-year-old lady. Hearing such words, the heroine smiled joyfully. At the same time, she asked if they were ready to start selling the elixir on the black market. The secretary said it was so because the first batch had already been manufactured. He also said that, it turned out, he had taken good care of secrecy. If someone wanted to find out where the elixir was coming from, the information would lead to Duke Eldir. The heroine, with a smile on her face, said that was just wonderful. So, the Duke would try to get rid of the elixir on the black market. As a result, everyone would think the recipe belonged to him. That's exactly why it wouldn't even occur to him that an 8-year-old child was behind it. Then the girl asked about the mass production of this elixir. Simon said that the supply routes for materials and the workshops were already prepared. However, it would be cheaper to use slaves. And so, the likelihood of the recipe leaking was practically zero. In this world, slaves were simply commonplace. At that very time, the heroine thought sadly that she didn't want to use slaves because of memories from her past life. So she told her interlocutor that she thought they should create jobs. He asked what the girl was talking about. The main heroine knew that the Weaver lands were barren, and farming was impossible here. So, the only way to earn money here was hunting. As a result of all these factors, if they allowed people to work for them, the economy would develop through a constant flow of money. The secretary asked if she wanted to build a workshop here for personal reasons. The girl said that was true because she wanted to pay someone back. Simon thought that when he had first arrived here, he thought Garcia was really joking. But still, every time he followed this girl's train of thought, he began to doubt her age. At first, he was really here just for the money, but she really was an amazing girl. So the young man bowed to her and said he would do everything as she wished. In the city of Otlov, the Black Estate had a lively atmosphere. Axel was excited and asked his interlocutor what had happened and if his owner had changed. He asked how that was possible. The interlocutor said that, of course, it was all possible. The young man thought that his owner had left even before entrusting him with his first task. Then he became curious if he just didn't suit him after all. And suddenly, the interlocutor held out a book to him and told him to take it. Axel asked what it was. The other told him his new owner had sent it. He also noted that the young man should read this book before his first task. The young man thought, his first task, and asked if they would give him work or something. Then he began to think about what he would actually have to do on it. So he asked the interlocutor what he would have to do. The other said it was unknown for now, and he should calm down now. A moment later, he added that he could still share some information with him. The hero asked him to share it with him. But the interlocutor, in turn, smiled strangely and said he would learn this information when the time came. As a result, the young man realized this strange person had no idea himself. Then he asked when his new owner would come. The young man told him he wouldn't be coming because a representative would be in charge of everything. All instructions and tasks would come through the representative. The hero asked what that meant. The interlocutor said he didn't know anything because he was only saying what he had been asked to. Axel immediately began to ponder all this information he had received. So, the owner had changed immediately after his appearance. He also looked at the book and thought about how this children's book was connected to his first job. The story in this book was about a boy with red eyes. It was written about a youth who was bought because of his eye color. The story of a child who was constantly surrounded by flame, and wherever he went, fire followed on his heels. It was a rather sad story. The young man thought, had he seen his own eyes, very yellow in the center and scarlet at the edges, so they were indeed similar to tongues of flame. Spirits born of fire would always pursue him. The hero understood that he had read this story when he was very small. Axel stood and reflected on all this, not understanding why he needed this story. And suddenly, a man addressed him and asked if he was here. He also noted that, it seemed, he was the child named Axel. The young man asked him who he was. The interlocutor said he would become his teacher. Axel asked in surprise why that was. The man said his sponsor, Adrian Black, had hired him. The hero thought, was Adrian his new owner's name? He also realized that, it seemed, Black was a title, not a surname. Suddenly, the interlocutor told him to follow him. In the future, he would have to learn a lot, including history, geography, soul theory, and mathematics. Axel asked in surprise why he had to learn all this. The teacher said he didn't know because he was only doing what he was hired for. The young man thought that only nobles received such education. After all, he understood it would be better if he spent more of his free time on fencing. Now he was curious what his new owner was trying to achieve. Usually, spirits are born from earth and sun, but after a fire, fire spirits can appear. Unlike spirits of earth and sun, they are weak and die as soon as the flame goes out. But still, one day these weak spirits surpassed ordinary ones. As a result, hundreds of fire spirits followed one after another, and everything plunged literally into chaos. People called the leader of all this nightmare. Axel sat and listened attentively to all this information being provided to him. The teacher told him this was an approximate image of this spirit, and many felt fear just from looking at it. This spirit, in the form of a wolf with golden horns, was very strong. Many had tried to tame it, but no one had succeeded. So, if the young man saw it, he should run as far as possible. Although, if he met it, nothing would save the young man anyway. Axel asked why it was all like that. The teacher said if he was asking why, it was just a fire spirit. And such spirits loved people with eyes like his. At that very time, the young man wanted to object to his teacher, but suddenly the door swung open. The main heroine's secretary entered and apologized, saying he would only be a moment. He also noted it was urgent, which was why he had burst in without knocking. At this time, he looked at him and said there were many visitors today. Simon, however, addressed Axel Valentine and noted that his first task was in the envelope. After some time, the young man took out the task written in the envelope. It was about the young man collecting 7 colored crystals from the crystal lake in the Great Desert. At this time, Axel was already walking through the desert, searching for those very things he had been told to find. The signature on the task was from Adrian Black. The young man thought that he hadn't even seen the owner's face once yet, and he had already given him work. What a strange person. Also, the young man understood that all the items provided to him by the owner were of the best quality, although he wouldn't have noticed it if Bishop hadn't started yelling. His previous owner hadn't given him anything like that. The hero knew that the Great Desert, Crystal Lake, and colored crystals were things he had been taught about in his lessons, so it turned out his studies had been useful after all. Now he knew how to read maps correctly, so he wouldn't get lost, and it really was easier. Also, in that very envelope with the task was a black envelope, which said to open it only in case of emergency. So the young man looked at it and thought why they had given it to him. Still, he doubted there was anything dangerous in his assignment. While he was thinking about all this, he heard some strange sounds and wondered what it was. To figure out what sound it was, the young man turned his head and behind him saw a huge horde of fiery animals. At their forefront was a special beast, and the young man thought was that nightmare. When he realized it was enormous danger, he started to run. At the same time, he thought why it had appeared here of all places. He needed to think quickly about what to do. After running for a little while, the young man saw a mountain there and immediately climbed it. While he was on it, he looked down and saw the beasts pursuing him. As a result, he now had nowhere to run. But still, the young man didn't understand why this was happening. At that moment, he remembered the words that his eyes were like tongues of flame and that spirits born of fire would always pursue him. That's exactly why he now thought, was all this happening because of his eyes? The main heroine sat at home and thought that Axel had probably already set off on his first task. At the same time, the girl realized that if she had followed the original plot, the hero wouldn't have received his first assignment for a long time. In the novel's plot, the reason Axel didn't get an assignment for a long time was that the order assignments were being destroyed. All this was done because the members of the chess association wanted to isolate Axel. They kept him in confinement, betting on whether the boy would survive. For Robert, it was just a gambling game, so he didn't object. But one day, one of the missions prompted Robert to use Axel. The fire was one of the most important events in the hero's development. Axel possessed decent survival skills, and his adoptive father had been a former knight commander. So, he had taught Axel the basics of everything he knew himself, and now the hero only had to survive. And so now the young man was sitting on a mountain, and near him was a huge horde of fiery beasts. They sat and waited for the young man under the leadership of their commander, Nightmare. Axel sat and understood he was trapped anyway. Because of the immense heat, it was already hard for him to breathe, and he thought, was this how he would die? The hero fell from exhaustion and remembered the words that his eyes were like tongues of flame. It was because of them that fire spirits would always pursue him. Now he lay and thought these cursed eyes were to blame for everything. Then the young man looked down and thought if he tore his eyes out, would the monsters leave? Then he thought, if they liked his eyes so much, then let them take them. The very moment he decided to do what he had in mind, he looked down and saw the black envelope there. He remembered it was that very letter from the owner he had been told to open in case of danger. The main heroine had written it, and in it, she asked why a red-eyed child had to survive on his own. Such children still died earlier than anyone else, but he wouldn't perish. It was written in it that he should aim for the leader of these animals. The child in the fairy tale survived 7 disasters, and one day he was tied to a post in the center of the village. But later, everything around was engulfed in flames. But the boy was unharmed and walked out of the fire as if nothing had happened. At this time, Axel thought that fairy tales were just made up after all. However, if the child hadn't perished in the fire, maybe he could too. The hero decided to try if he could withstand the fire from these beasts. At this time, a fiery bird flew up to him and threw its heat at him. But strangely, this fire didn't harm the young man at all. The hero, at this time, realized that now he knew his red eyes were capable of much. At the same time, he understood that, most likely, due to lack of air, he had lost his mind altogether. Thanks to the eyes he possessed, he definitely wouldn't burn in this flame. Therefore, the letter his owner had written was the key to realizing this. The main advice written in this letter was to defeat the leader of the animals. That's exactly why he had to defeat him. The hero immediately rushed into the crowd of animals, but he aimed only at the leader, to defeat him first. When he got closer to the animals, the fire began to spread even more, and the temperature rose simply to hellish levels. Axel looked at his father's sword and realized it was melting from such fierce temperature. A moment later, not a trace remained of the sword he had held in his hands. The hero understood it was as hot here as if he were in hell. Now he stood before the leader of all these animals, Nightmare. At the same time, he told himself not to give up because, after all, he had to overcome his fear and defeat this creature. But still, the young man didn't understand how he was supposed to do it. At that moment, he remembered a conversation with his father. Back then, he had asked him how to become an elemental knight. His father noted that he had to tame a spiritual beast and make a contract with it, then he would receive the title. Axel asked how he could tame a beast then. His father said he couldn't explain it right then, but he could try to befriend it or subdue it by force. The simplest way was that he could climb on it and not let go, until the spiritual beast surrendered and submitted. At that very time, the hero climbed onto Nightmare and thought he had climbed on, but it wasn't even moving at this time. He asked himself if he had tamed it. Then he realized it wasn't so because it wasn't that simple. After that, Axel grabbed it by the horn and thought he needed to force the beast to accept him. When he grabbed the animal by the horn, it started screaming and trying to throw the young man off. The beast ran around the area, and the young man thought he had heard that this spiritual beast was of the highest level. It was much stronger than its kind. At the same time, he wondered if the beast thought he would run away. Memories of his own father were in the young man's head at that moment. He had a conversation with him in his head, and those words he had said to him last. Once again, he wondered who had sent him here. The boy was struck by the thought that he had believed the man would support him, but it seemed the man didn't like him. The man noticed he wasn't answering, but just let it be. The hero wondered, was he too insignificant for them? At that very moment, the master of the establishment told him to confirm his identity and come closer. Then he examined his eyes and asked if his eyes were really red. Eyes the color of raging flame, cursed eyes. Such children are called red eyes, and they are extremely rare. Many people with that eye color died in childhood, and the cause of their death is fire. After all, people say that fire spirits love such children. However, it is precisely because of these spirits that fires often break out. That is why people came to hate children with red eyes. The hero thought that perhaps, for this very reason, his parents had abandoned him. Yet, he had never asked his adoptive father about his birth parents. And so the boy wondered, was the man unsettled by the color of his eyes? At that moment, the man declared that these were true red eyes and looked at the boy with interest. He asked the elder, wasn't he afraid of red eyes? The master of the establishment asked, how could one be afraid of such things? Then he noted that he wanted to ask him something. And he asked, did he know that fire spirits love children with red eyes very much? That means he has a high chance of becoming a knight, an elementalist. After that, the man patted the boy on the head and said that he believed in him and would try to support him. The hero then thought that this was the first time someone, other than his late father, was patting his head. And so, for the first time, he didn't hate his eyes. The man asked if the boy wanted to stay with him until he grew up. After all, if he felt like it, he could always just leave. The hero thought at that moment that he no longer wanted to sleep on the ground, and so, if he stayed here, things would probably be good. That is why he told the man that he wanted to stay here and asked him to allow it. The man said that of course he would let him stay, but he should sign a contract first. At that time, he was thinking that red eyes were such a stroke of luck for him. The hero wondered if he would now be able to earn money quickly or get a warm and clean place. The master of the establishment was delighted and thought about how he should use this boy. After all, it turned out that now he completely belonged to him because of the contract. Then the man told the boy that he had a very good name. He also said, "Welcome to the Chess Association, Axel Valentine." The Chess Association is a place where association members sponsor promising individuals as their property. Within the association, talents can be bought out, and in the eyes of people, this is seen as noble support for young talents. But in reality, this association engages in plain slave trading. Many children who lost their parents ended up in slavery. If a talent refuses to participate and wants to leave the association, their master will demand the return of all funds spent on raising the young person. It is an obvious fact that no one can repay this debt. The children grew up in terrible conditions, and the novel's protagonist, Axel Valentine, was such a talent who lived in the association for a long time. Axel's owner was a man named Robert Black. He was a villain who manipulated the protagonist and made money off him. Nevertheless, Axel did not object. He trusted Robert and followed him as his adoptive father. But in return for all this devotion, Axel was betrayed. As a result of this whole story, he barely survived and escaped. In the future, the hero would grow stronger and take revenge on the association by killing Robert. The main heroine hadn't read the book but understood the novel's plot. So, she wanted to help the protagonist, and it would be good to save him from that very association. After all, the girl knew that if everything proceeded according to the original novel's plot, then in the end, the world would be completely destroyed. Consequently, everyone, including herself, would be dead. The protagonist Axel Valentine can still save the world. Not all is lost yet. Also, the protagonist had the ability to return to the past. This ability of his activates in moments of extreme danger. Axel returned countless times and in the end couldn't take it anymore and went mad. That is why he couldn't fix the ending, and as a result, the world was completely destroyed. The main heroine understood that to prevent the endless returns and the world's collapse, she needed to make Axel strong immediately. At that very moment, someone knocked on the door leading to the girl's room. The heroine told them to enter. A man was there, and he announced that he had just finished his work. This man's name was Simon Danet, and he was the secretary Rebecca had helped find. The girl understood that judging by the documents, he was indeed a very reliable person. However, he was someone exceptionally loyal to money. The girl knew this man would be loyal as long as he was paid. She understood that there were many offers from her aunt, but she was still glad she had chosen this guy. Then the girl said that he had returned quickly, meaning he deserved a small bonus. That is why she handed him a pouch of money and asked him to take it. But the guy said he didn't need it, as he would only accept the reward after his work had been verified. The girl said that was fine and proceeded to inspect his work. At the same time, the girl saw that the work was, as always, literally perfect. She was also thinking about how to make the protagonist strong without harming him in the process. So, she needed to steal the role of Robert Black, who is a member of the chess association. Therefore, she needed to become the Robert who guided Axel and then betrayed him. After all, Robert contributes immensely to the main character's development. And so, to take on such a role, she ordered Simon to buy out Robert's shares in the association. As a result of all this work, the main heroine was able to see a list of everyone under Robert's patronage. As the girl expected, Axel's contract was there. Now she needed to provide the protagonist with the best of everything. The tasks would remain as difficult as before, and she wouldn't change the betrayal that motivated the protagonist either. Still, the girl didn't want to deceive him, but she would have to do it all. It seemed this was necessary only so that the main character would become stronger afterward. The girl told Simon that this was simply excellent work he had done. She also said that from now on, he should act as a member of the chess association. At the same time, he would need to carry out her instructions. Of course, the salaries of the association representative and the secretary would be paid to him separately. The guy said he would do everything in his power. Furthermore, the main heroine stated that no one should discover the connection between the representative and her. And so she asked if the guy could conceal their cooperation. The interlocutor said that of course he could do that, as no one would find out he was working for an 8-year-old lady. Hearing such words, the heroine smiled happily. Then she asked if they were ready to start selling the elixir on the black market. The secretary said that was correct, as the first batch had already been manufactured. He also said that he had taken good care of secrecy. If anyone wanted to know where the elixir was coming from, the information would lead to Duke Eldir. The heroine said with a smile on her face that this was simply wonderful. So, the Duke would try to get rid of the elixir on the black market. Consequently, everyone would think the recipe belonged to him. That is why he would never even think that an 8-year-old child was behind it. Then the girl asked, what about mass production of this elixir? Simon said that the supply routes for materials and the workshops were already prepared. However, it would be cheaper to use slaves. And so, the probability of the recipe leaking was practically zero. In this world, slaves were simply commonplace. At that moment, the heroine thought sadly that she didn't want to use slaves due to memories of her past life. Therefore, she told her interlocutor that she thought they should create jobs. He asked what the girl was talking about. The main heroine knew that the Weaver lands were barren, and agriculture was impossible here. So, the only way to earn money here was through hunting. As a result of all these factors, if they allowed people to work for them, the economy would develop due to the constant flow of money. The secretary asked if she wanted to build a workshop here for personal reasons. The girl said that was correct, as she wanted to provide for someone. Simon thought that when he first arrived here, he thought Garcia was truly joking. But every time he followed this girl's train of thought, he began to doubt her age. At first, he was really here just for the money, but she was truly an amazing girl. That is why the guy bowed to her and said he would do everything as she wished. In Black Manor, in the city of Otlov, the atmosphere was lively. Axel was excited and asked his interlocutor what had happened and if his master had really changed. He asked how that was possible. The interlocutor said that, of course, it was all possible. The boy thought that his owner had left even before giving him his first assignment. Then he wondered, was he really not suitable for him? Suddenly, the interlocutor handed him a book and told him to take it. Axel asked what it was. The man told him that his new master had sent it. He also said that the boy should read this book before his first assignment. The boy wondered, his first assignment? And asked if he was being given work or what. Then he began to ponder what he actually had to do for it. So, he asked the interlocutor what he would have to do. The man said it was unknown for now and that he should calm down. He added a moment later that he could share some information with him. The hero asked him to share it. But the interlocutor, in turn, smiled strangely and said that he would learn this information when the time came. As a result, the the boy understood that this strange man had no idea himself. Then he asked when his new master would come. The man told him that he wouldn't be coming, as a representative would be in charge of everything. All instructions and assignments would come through the representative. The hero asked what he meant by that. The interlocutor said he didn't know anything, as he was only saying what he was asked to. Axel immediately began to ponder all this information he had received. So, the master had changed right after his arrival. He also looked at the book and thought, how was this children's book connected to his first job? The story in this book was about a boy with red eyes. It was about a youth who was bought for his eye color. A story about a child constantly surrounded by flame, and wherever he went, fire followed on his heels. It was a rather sad story. The boy thought, had he seen his own eyes, very yellow in the center and scarlet at the edges, so they were truly like tongues of flame. Spirits born of fire would always pursue him. The hero understood. He had read this story when he was very young. Axel stood and reflected on all this, not understanding why he needed this story. Suddenly, a man addressed him and asked if he was the one. He also noted that he must be the child named Axel. The boy asked him who he was. The interlocutor declared that he would become his teacher. Axel asked in surprise why that was. The man said that his sponsor, Adrian Black, had hired him. The hero thought, was Adrian the name of his new master? He also realized that Black seemed to be a title, not a surname. Suddenly, the interlocutor told him to follow him. In the future, he would have to learn many things, including history, geography, soul theory, and mathematics. Axel asked in surprise why he had to learn all this. The teacher said he didn't know, as he was only doing what he was hired for. The boy thought that only nobles received such an education. After all, he believed it would be better if he spent more of his free time practicing fencing. Now he was curious what his new master was trying to achieve. Usually, spirits are born from earth and sun, but after a fire, fire spirits can appear. Unlike earth or sun spirits, they are weak and die as soon as the flame goes out. But one day, these weak spirits surpass the ordinary ones. As a result, hundreds of fire spirits followed one after another, and everything was plunged into chaos. The leader of all this was called Nightmare by people. Axel sat and listened attentively to all this information being provided to him. The teacher told him that this was an approximate image of that spirit, and many feel fear just by looking at it. This spirit, in the form of a wolf with golden horns, was very strong. Many tried to tame it, but no one succeeded. So, if the boy sees it, he should run as far as possible. Although, upon meeting it, probably nothing would save the boy. Axel asked why that was. The teacher said if he was asking why, it was simply because he was a fire spirit. And such spirits love people with eyes like his. At that very moment, the boy wanted to object to his teacher, but suddenly the door swung open. The heroine's secretary entered and apologized, saying he would be brief. He also said it was urgent, which is why he entered without knocking. He looked at the teacher and said he had many visitors today. Simon then turned to Axel Valentine and said that his first assignment was in the envelope. A moment later, the boy took out the assignment written in the envelope. It stated that the boy was to collect 7 colored crystals from the crystal lake in the Great Desert. Soon after, Axel was walking through the desert, searching for the things he was told to find. The signature on the assignment was from Adrian Black. The boy thought that he hadn't even seen his master's face yet, and this strange man had already given him work. The boy also understood that all the items provided by his master were of the highest quality, although he might not have noticed if Bishop hadn't started yelling. His previous owner had never given him anything like that. The hero knew that the Great Desert, Crystal Lake, and colored crystals were things he had been taught about in his lessons. So, his studies were actually useful. Now he knew how to read maps properly, so he wouldn't get lost, and it was indeed easier. Also, in the same envelope with the assignment, there was a black envelope, which said to open it only in an emergency. The boy looked at it and wondered why he was given this. Still, he doubted there was anything dangerous about his mission. While he was thinking about all this, he heard some strange noises and wondered what it was. To figure out what the sound was, the boy turned his head and saw a huge horde of fiery animals behind him. At their forefront was a special beast, and the boy thought, could that be Nightmare? When he realized this was immense danger, he started to run. At the same time, he thought, why did it appear here of all places? He needed to think quickly about what to do. After running for a while, the boy saw a mountain and immediately climbed it. While on it, he looked down and saw the beasts pursuing him. Consequently, he truly had nowhere to run, but the boy still didn't understand why this was happening. At that moment, he remembered the words that his eyes were like tongues of flame and that spirits born of fire would always pursue him. That is why he now thought, was all this happening because of his eyes? The main heroine sat at home and thought that Axel had probably already set off on his first assignment. At the same time, the girl realized that if she had followed the original plot, the hero wouldn't have received his first mission for a long time. In the novel's plot, the reason Axel didn't get an assignment for so long was that the order documents were being destroyed. This was done because the members of the chess association wanted to isolate Axel. They kept him confined, making bets on whether the boy would survive. For Robert, it was just a gambling game, so he didn't object. But one day, one of the missions prompted Robert to use Axel. The fire, this is one of the most important events in the hero's development. Axel possessed decent survival skills, and his adoptive father was a former knight commander. So, he had taught Axel the basics of everything he knew himself, and now the hero only had to survive. And now the boy was sitting on a mountain with a huge pack of fiery beasts near him. They sat, waiting for the boy, led by their commander, Nightmare. Axel sat and understood he was trapped nonetheless. Because of the intense heat, it was already hard to breathe, and he thought, was this how he would die? The hero fell, exhausted, and remembered the words that his eyes were like tongues of flame. Because of them, spirits of fire would always pursue him. Now, lying there, he thought these cursed eyes were to blame for everything. Then the boy looked down and thought, if he tore his eyes out, would the monsters leave? Then he thought, if they liked his eyes so much, they could take them. The very moment he decided to do what he had in mind, he looked down and saw the black envelope there. He remembered it was the letter from his master that he was supposed to open in case of danger. It was written by the main heroine, and it asked, why should a red-eyed child have to survive on his own? Such children die earlier than anyone, but he would not perish. It said he should target the leader of these animals. In the fairy tale, the child survived 7 calamities, and one day he was tied to a post in the center of the village. But later, everything was engulfed in flames. But the boy was unharmed and walked out of the fire as if nothing had happened. At this time, Axel thought that fairy tales were just fiction. However, if that child didn't perish in the fire, then maybe he could too. The hero decided to try and see if he could withstand the fire from these beasts. At that moment, a fiery bird flew towards him and threw its heat upon him. But strangely, that fire did no harm to the boy. The hero realized at that moment that he now knew his red eyes were capable of much. At the same time, he understood that he was probably losing his mind from lack of air. Thanks to the eyes he possessed, he would definitely not burn in these flames. Therefore, the letter written by his master was the key to realizing this. The main advice written in that letter was to defeat the leader of the animals. That is why he had to defeat it. The hero immediately rushed into the crowd of animals, but he aimed only for the leader, to take it down first. As he got closer to the animals, the fire spread even more, and the temperature rose to hellish levels. Axel looked at his father's sword and saw it was melting from the furious temperature. A moment later, not a trace remained of the sword he had held. The hero felt it was so hot here, as if he were in hell. Now he stood before the leader of all these animals, Nightmare. At the same time, he told himself not to give up, as he had to overcome his fear and defeat this creature. But the boy still didn't understand how he was supposed to do it. At that moment, he remembered a conversation with his father. He had asked him then how to become an elemental knight. His father said he had to tame a spirit beast and form a contract with it, then he would receive the title. Axel asked how he could tame a beast then. His father said he couldn't explain it right then, but he could try to befriend it or subdue it by force. The simplest way was to climb onto it and not let go until the spirit beast surrendered and submitted. At that very moment, the hero climbed onto Nightmare and thought he had climbed on, but it wasn't even moving. He asked himself, had he tamed it? Then he realized that wasn't the case. It couldn't be that simple. Then Axel grabbed it by the horn and thought he needed to force the beast to accept him. When he grabbed the animal by the horn, it started screaming and trying to throw the boy off. The beast ran around the area, and the boy thought he had heard that this spirit beast was of the highest level, much stronger than its kind. At the same time, he wondered if the beast thought he would run away. Memories of his own father were in the boy's head at that moment. He recalled a conversation with him and the words he had said to him at the end. Axel remembered his father's words and shouted that he would not die here, for he had to fulfill his will.